Welcome everybody to Aegis Esports. I'm your caster Nemo, and I'm here today with a fellow OSA, a fellow teammate, the one and only Spids. How are you going, Spids?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm glad that OCE has overtaken yet another region of EU by taking over their cast. I'm pretty excited for today, and I think we have some good matches ahead of us.
Yeah. Talking about taking over a region, for round one, we actually have two teams. One EU Farmers, which is actually a South American team trying to take on Europe, and their opponents will be ABG Demacia. And I think with that, we should probably get into the deck list.
Yeah. I think we're starting with Viga Nora from memory. Yeah, starting with Viga Nora. This is the deck that popped up obviously last season when Nora was released. I hope I have my numbers right there. After we had a little stint with Nora Heimerdinger, we decided to go back into Darkness variants with Nora Viga, and I think it's a really interesting list, running 4 copies of the 6 mana spells, being very control heavy while also just flooding the board with a bunch of units. What do you think about this deck?
I do really like it. The Vega is definitely more interesting than Nora. You're a bit less tempo when you're kind of going for an alternative win con. It's really good if you're dealing with anything that doesn't really have a backline, so it's slightly better into Ionia. I do like it, especially because a lot of people are leaning into Seraphine Ionia as kind of the deck to be on right now, instead of Israel Noxus. So yeah, I think it's very heads up. I really like these ratios. The box is a bit awkward. Do like the warp just for stall. Maybe could be on free glimpse, but we're not on Heimer, so I understand that. Quietus is a 2 of. It's very refined list, but you could definitely argue that maybe you want to be a bit of on a bit of free ofs like a Quietus.
Yeah, I will say that Quietus has cropped up a lot more in the meta now. I think a lot of people are going for Quietus builds in their lineups to try and beat the Israel Seraphine, and I presume this is attempting to target Israel Seraphine or Seraphine Ionia. I'm going to presume that Broken Cocker's other decks are trying to also target a very similar deck.
And then with that, I think we have another deck list to show, and that might be Leona Diana. In a second. Otherwise, we can still keep talking about this one. And hey, look, we probably shouldn't rush it. I mean, this is a deck that people really haven't played with much recently, and you might be like, "Hey, what's going on here?" Right? But I guess we are going to this one.
Diana, this is a deck that's cropped up also rather recently. Sorry to cut you off, Annie. Where you're trying to combine both the Nightfall and Daybreak packages with both Ravoon and Winding Light as the top ends for both of these sort of mini Intargon deck building formats. I know my words. And the Twilight Protector sort of brings the whole deck together as well, being able to do both halves of the Daybreak and the Nightfall together. It's a really interesting deck that plays for a weird mid-range board-based control without running Demacia, which is a really interesting way to go for it.
Yeah, and especially with the Diana Leona deck, this is actually sponsored by AR. I want to mention that because AR has been sponsoring us for a while, and it's very important. Probably one of the best sites you can find for deck lists, and especially for visuals, so I don't need to, have a tough time doing my job. And I can definitely see cards right now that are very important, like this Doombeast, like this Winding Light, that you might not really think would be in a deck like this, but it's a lot more tempo oriented than control, and it just emphasizes that, especially with the Moonlight Affliction, with the Solari Sunhawks, like you were saying, this Twilight Protector. Very interesting list, and I can't wait to actually see it in action.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about this deck, but I've actually never seen it be played. So I'm pretty excited to see if we can follow Leah, what sort of decks that we end up seeing played. Hopefully it doesn't get banned out if we end up following Leah. But I'm pretty excited to see. The new Sun Guardian is a card that I'm really interested in seeing. I still haven't seen it very much, despite it being around for quite a while.
It's a pretty good card right now, right? I would say it's maybe a Daybreak version of White Flame. Obviously, you don't really have Fury, but it kind of just it kind of just stacks a lot, and it's one of those cards that can snowball. And yeah, it's really good at mid-range lists, and especially with Leona now and how it works, can be very, very impactful.
Yeah, I'm presuming it's sort of like a Demacia Mirror Breaker. I'm saying Mirror Breaker because a Targon deck like this looks a bit Demacian to me. The idea of just having a big unit that blocks any sort of Demacia attacks, I'm presuming this might be decent into Vayne. But I've got no stats here and just talking randomly.
It's so ideally it actually targets both, but I think it like both as in also Seraphine as well because like challenges and stuff, but it does lose a lot of value just because it's not as strong as the decks in the current meta, but it can definitely win games. Like you were saying, it can be good into Demacia, especially because we can find certain tempo players. And then you just have other type of value, which is very important, like the Unto Dust package with Doombeast.
Yeah. Heavens Aligned is an interesting choice. When Heavens Aligned was released, I thought it was a bit of a joke. Like, sure, it's card creation, but it's not going to be that good card creation. But if we can get a situation where Ravoon's on the field and you Nightfall the Heavens Aligned, you get 2 cards in hand. It also gives you a Leona stun. And Moonlight Affliction is also another interesting spell choice to try and like push through wacky lethals after you've stunned a few things and then give them can't block. Just some interesting spell choices as well.
Yeah, I definitely remember when people were kind of sleeping on Heaven's Line, but it's just very versatile, especially when you have this weird hybrid version of Daybreak and Nightfall, right? It's like almost a very perfect card you want. And there's specific lines where you want either Daybreak or Nightfall. I think like just also having the ability to always get the 7/7 dragon almost like a lot more frequently is also very important because it makes your end game it makes your end game a lot more different in a way where you have more outs, right? So even though this deck looks very linear, when you have Heavens aligned into that 7/7, it allows you to kind of just play for another dimension of a win con.
Yeah, and you've only got like I'm counting 9 Nightfall triggers. If you draw low on your Nightfall triggers and you really want Diana to have Challenger, I think Heavens Aligned's a great like modal option to try and get that. So I do like the Heavens Aligned a lot.
Right. So yeah, this is like definitely an interesting list. We'll probably get into the game soon, but while we're here, we could probably talk about the AB. Sorry, sorry, I just got word from production here, and I think we might just look at the other deck instead because they're not really ready for it. So we'll go back to the Nora Vigar deck. Like we were saying, I just want to kind of pinpoint Portapalooza a lot. Normally, people didn't really think this card was good in the package at times, and then after the person in kind of APAC revitalized or even started Hymenora as a deck, made sense that Portapalooza was actually the card you want to be on. It really just made more draw and made the standpoints of tempo to be increased. And that's really what you want for this Nora deck is to just try and make huge tempo plays, and Portapalooza is kind of the card you want for that.
Yeah, it has a really interesting, while it doesn't look like a modal card, it actually plays rather modally where you're either playing it at a defensive turn to try and like get some burst speed blockers or as like an open attack, right? And if you've got the Nora already shuffling portals, you can know when your units are going to be summoned. So being able to keep this in the back of your mind and have like a burst speed summon your guaranteed units and maybe 1 or 2 more allows it to be like this really interesting choice decision as well as just like a decent passing option. If you don't have much else to do on your turn. It's a really interesting card that, while it costs a fair bit, it's just got so many like different ways to play it that makes it really powerful.
I think another one that people were sleeping on in their package is definitely Construct, right? Because I think if we were looking at what to add in the package, it was more the proactive cards, and then it was kind of the opposite. Junk Construct kind of just sits there on the board and pushes damage, and it's a really, really good combo enabler when you have Glimpse Beyond. That kind of draws more into portals, and just being able to kind of freely draw into something by killing a unit like the Construct, it makes things a lot more easier and allows you to be more proactive with your glimpses, which can be a bit awkward at times when you can't be.
Yeah, a card that I've not seen in these lists, and maybe it's standardized, but I didn't see it when I was playing this, is Hidden Pathways. It makes sense. Hidden Pathways can be procced pretty easily, but ever since it was nerfed down to 6 mana as opposed to 5, it's been a long time since I've seen Hidden Pathways see play. It's just interesting to see it back in the list.
It's it's definitely an interesting conclusion. I think maybe because they're playing the Veigar, they actually just want to be finding their Veigar and Sentinel more. Unlike because the spot would be usually the Bigglesworth sneezy Bigglesdust, and then it'll also be eclectic, right? So we've kind of opted out of that and just said more draw. I want my key cards like Veigar and Sentinel to kind of finish the game, and that's definitely why Kokoro has kind of opted out for this.
Yeah, it's definitely a different deck build to the more like tempo heavy versions with all the Beagle Dusts, for sure. I don't know what else we can talk about with this deck list. Shadow Owl's Tailstone is kind of cool. You can use it as a modal protect card or like buff up a unit. You got some interesting lines with Shadow Owl's Tailstone, but I don't know what else we can say about these decks.
I was curious about no Detonator. I think that's like the only other change I'm thinking about, and I'm wondering why no Detonator. Maybe because it's too slow. And I assume you're probably keeping up Seraphine, so Detonator isn't that great into Seraphine.
Yeah, my thinking is like it's probably not. If you've already got like a big darkness, I presume that the Detonator isn't what's going to save you against Vayne. I presume different play patterns is what's going to save you against Vayne. While against like Seraphine Israel, I presume it's just going to be a brick in your hand. So I think it's all about like the matchups you're trying to find. But it'll be interesting to see if the lack of Detonator ends up kicking Brock and Kokoro a bit down. We'll see.
I think like Kokoro probably knows what they're doing. This is a Latin player people don't really know about, but they're actually on OTK and they've been around for a while. They've top cutted before and they've done really well in the Latin scene for tournaments. So I don't see much deck building from them, but it looks like a refined list that they understand that they've like they know what they're doing and what they're trying to target, right? Because like that's very important in tournaments is like the specific list you want, and they've definitely cutted cards that they know certain matchups aren't going to be as important for those cards.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely run into Broken Kokoro a few times and definitely lost. He's definitely a very good player. And I think we're just waiting a bit longer for the matchup draft to happen.
But with that, I think we will actually go to a short break. It's taking a bit longer than we thought. So we'll probably be back in another 5 or so minutes and hope to see you guys in. Welcome back, everyone, to Aegis Esports, and we're here today, like before, to watch these great matches. We are talking just before about these matches with EU farmers, and they'll be versing ABG Demacia. Now, talking about the lineups and what they're versing, we've got them right here. Spitz, you just want to kind of run through these matchups for us?
Yeah, as soon as this pulled up, the first thing I noticed was a Bandle City Lee Sin Fizz. I've heard about this deck like a few seasons ago. The concept of sort of like I presume it's half prank, half like using Lee Sin in the same way that you use Lee Sin in Victor Lee Sin as a sort of just like removal tool. We've also got the Seraphine Israel Shadow Isles. We've got some really interesting decks that I wasn't expecting to see, but here we are with them anyway.
Yeah, so this Fizz Lee deck is kind of a hybrid combo deck. I wouldn't really say it's combo, but you can kind of do some good stuff with Lee Sin, and it's just more focused with spells. This was actually kind of popularized by TJP, if you don't know that person, in Americas, and then it was kind of brought to light by a lot of other players, and it found a bit of a niche, but right now, seeing this in a format that is very anti-Sarah makes a lot of sense. So it makes sense why they've brought this. And looking at Assassin's lineup, it is definitely looks like they're trying to target the Seraphine here.
Yeah, like you've got like three extremely aggressive decks, and I presume they're just trying to make Seraphine's removal tools pretty taxed. But having healing in the side of the Seraphine deck, I presume they're running Vile Feasts and that sort of thing. I think allow Broken Cockroach to probably do better than if this was a Noxus variant. And the other two decks are both Shadow Isles decks. Red Gwen runs a little bit of healing in the form of like Gwen and Vile Feast. So it's sort of like 3 healing decks versus 3 aggro decks. It'll be interesting to see if Broken Cockroach can sort of heal out of the ranges of these aggro.
Yeah, I really do like the SI change on the Noxus Israel, because they've probably realized and they're going, hey, the flavor this week is aggro, and what we're going to do is say, hey, we'll still bring the best deck in the game, but we'll just be prepared for it. So I really do like this. You've kind of just also reconciliated that idea with the Vega Nora and the Red Glen. Looks pretty good on the side of Kokoro. Spids, do you think you know what the bans are for this set?
It'll be interesting. I presume Broken Kokoro is going to ban like the most irritating aggro deck, and I'm actually going to presume that might end up being Fizz Lee Sin. Just because I can imagine Fizz being like an absolute pain to deal with, especially since they're running like Wandering Shepherd and Hookmaster. If you put a weapon on the Fizz, I think Fizz might go a little bit out of control. So it might just be a ban on the Fizz, but it could also be Annie Jin, which I think is also rather explosive. But I think you're definitely keeping Swain and Misfortune up as like the least explosive one of these decks.
Yeah, I also think that Lee Sin gains a lot of value into the Red Glen. Lee Sin's a really good tool to mitigate the mid game. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do ban the Fizz, but at the same time, you could disrespect it and say, hey, I'm just going to ban the best deck on that lineup, and it's probably Swain. Swain also might have merit into the Nora, but I'm not actually too sure about that matchup, because you do run mini morphs and you do run removal and tempo, so it could be very close for these bans.
Yeah, I don't know what these matchup tables are like. I haven't seen these decks go against each other for a long, long time. I presume ABG will likely ban, I will presume Vigar Nora, just because it's the most sort of irritating control deck that runs a lot of like low to the ground removal cards. Like the Quietus, like the Vile Feast. And if you have like a few portals, you're already going to have your board sort of stun locked. Just because you're going to have to go through so many units.
I could definitely see that over Red Glen. I think Red Glen is just like good into almost everything, and it has flat matchups, right? You might think you could be good into the Glen with your Lee Sin deck, like we were saying, but I think it does lose a lot of value otherwise in this table, like, because if they ban the Fizz and then they're just like kind of good into the Anijin and the MF Swain, it's problematic. So I'm not sure. I think it's either the Nora ban or the Glen ban.
We're definitely seeing Israel Seraphine SI stay up, which is interesting. We've seen so many different flavors of Israel Seraphine in 4 or 5 different regions now. And it's sort of like up to player choice, up to like the tourney choice to see which people end up going with at this point. Just interesting to see different players have different choices for which Israel Seraphine they pick.
Yeah, I think Seraphine in general is always going to be staying in your tournament lineup. It's just dependent on what flavor you think people are trying to target. You can even run, the Targan variant, for all we know, right, with the catastrophes, but that's very dependent on what you think you're going to be versing. And Kokoro just realized, I'm going to be versing aggro, so why don't I just bring the most anti-aggro thing? And I just really love seeing this deck list in the lineup for Kokoro.
Yeah, and what I love about Aegis Esports is sort of these pocket metas that we get where every single week, like, a concept sort of rises among everyone's minds in what to play. Last week it was like Ash LeBlanc. At least in Americas, it was Ash LeBlanc, and now here we're seeing a lot of aggro decks try and prey on these sort of Seraphine decks. So it's just interesting to see like the way the meta evolves, like a wave, trying to hit certain things. It's just interesting to see it evolve.
Yeah, it's not only that, but it feels like everyone's on the same page. It's just such a natural occurrence because if we look at these deck lists right now, what people brought and the amount of like what people brought, majority of it is aggro. That's because, like you're saying, there is a certain pocket meta where you're actually good into Ezreal Seraphine with a certain amount of tools, and then you also beat those Vayne decks because Noxus, hello, has Flock, and Flock is a very good thing against Demacia.
Yeah. What I also love is despite like these sort of broad waves of like general concepts on what you want to target, we also have like these like unique, pocket decks that people like to play, such as like this Fizzly Sin that like even despite these broad sweeping like decisions, you still pick these little minutia decks that really like show someone's like interest in what they like as a player, as well as like preying on, you don't know this deck, I'm going to beat you with this deck if it's a bit of like an awkward aggro deck that not many people have seen before.
Yeah, minutia. That is definitely a word. Not really sure what it means, but it probably means minute. And talking about minute, we're going to see the ban on something that people barely play, and that is the Fizzly Sin. We were talking about that, right? It feels like it makes the most sense. It has a bit of legs against everything, even though it looks weird. And the ban on the Nora, very standard bans.
Yeah, I think this is sort of at least what I expected. I knew you were thinking it might be the Red Gwen, but I think this was pretty likely. And I don't know when we'll get into game here, but I'm looking forward to this set. I think it'll be a lot of interesting to see, especially the Red Gwen. I'm a big fan of Red Gwen as a deck, and seeing how Mr. Assassin goes against Red Gwen will be something that I think will be enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, that deck is a mid-range deck, just has so many weird outs, and it's a very fort-heavy one, right? Because you can go infinite with it. You can kind of just sneak through so much damage. If people aren't prepared, you can do some crazy stuff. So it's a very showmaker of a deck, and I think on cast, there's just so many lines you can't think of, and then they just surprise you, right? Because like you're just like, wow, why didn't I think about this? And that deck does that a lot.
Yeah, I remember when you first showed me this deck, like Trevo was just messing around with it. It was just before the seasonal. And I remember I called it like every single like lore term you could think of. Tempo, combo, aggro, infinite. It had like the longest name in my deck builder. It was just a very interesting deck. And as time has gone on, most people have seen it as a tempo deck that plays for a bit of mid-range. It's got like an explosive finish. It goes with a followed keyword. But it's just a very interesting deck that you've got a lot of play with.
But that's what it is, right? It's just literally such a versatile deck, and because of that, it has so much flat matchups that you can kind of bring it in any lineup, and you'll do probably well. Because I feel like you can kind of keep up everything, and you're actually just fine with it if you can play it at a very good rate.
Yeah. MF Swain's also another deck that has been creeping up slowly and surely. It's sort of like some people see it as like the further evolution of Pirate. Some people see it as like a different version of TF Swain with a bit more of an aggro pull. I know a lot of people like the idea of Misfortune leveling up Swain. You got a big attack and they all block, and then Swain levels up, and Swain does his big attack. You can whack your table with his animation. It's an interesting deck that, while I haven't seen a lot of success with it, I know it has been successful because people continue to keep bringing it.
Yeah, you still just run the really good tools of like beating Seraphine and Demacia. It does lose that kind of decency into other matchups, just because, like, I don't know. I feel like aggro is pretty targetable if you have other lineups with Demacia, right? Because, like, if you bring something like Sivaike, it can kind of be decent into it because you have the spell shit on there. But talking about other potential lineups and potential games, we're going to be in the game right now, and that will be Ezreal Seraphine into Annie Jhin for the side of Mist Assassin.
Yeah, having a Jhin in your opener seems like a pretty good thing to be keeping, but I think we want a little bit more early game as Mr. Assassin, and Koko's got a really interesting hand with the Quietus that will obviously kill the Annie and the Ferris Financier to get like a board unit, as well as some, all the good Ferris stuff that we've all come to know and love. Kicking the fan club president there.
So this matchup is pretty interesting, even though Mr. Assassin doesn't really have a hand. What Annie Jhin is trying to do is just try for tempo plays and be aggressive. Because you have those certain amount of stuns, you can kind of do that. But you really need an early board for that. And talking about early boards, Quietus does come down and Anijin has been silenced, which is very important because we didn't have anything until that rearguard.
Yeah, the rearguard topic was very good. You don't want to be playing like a naked Imperial, a Demolitionist, just targeting nothing, doing nothing to the Nexus. And then you also can't proc your Doom Beast. So getting this draw was like really, really good on the side of Mr. Assassin. But the Fallen Feline, a card that I wasn't expecting in this deck, but I guess it makes a lot of sense. Do you know how many predicts this run anymore?
I do not have the deck list open right now, but I assume they might be on free time trick. That probably makes the most sense because when you have Seraphine and a Fallen Feline in your deck, there's a high chance, well, the Hexside that is, there is a really high chance that you can pull it, right? And that's just a deal for board clear. And I really do like that, especially because, this version of Ezreal Seraphine isn't as explosive.
I've pulled it up now. It's got 2 copies of Time Trick, but the other thing, obviously, is once you shuffle your deck, it won't be in the bottom 10 cards anymore, so you can just draw into it with your immense amount of draw cards from Broken Kokoro's side. But the Crackshot Corsair coming down from Mr. Assassin, allowing us to sort of at least present something, but our turns are looking like a little bit awkward. We just don't have like the combos that we sort of want. We don't have the stuns. We don't have the ways to proc our Doom Beast easily. We're very lucky that we keep drawing these 1-mana units, because without them we would not be in the best of positions.
But like a repeat of history, here comes the Quietus, and Anijin is going to be gone once again. So Mrs. Assassin has a play or two here, decides not to further, and probably just wants the Doom Beast. But like you were saying, this is a very, very slow hand for Mrs. Assassin, and if Broker and Kokoro can just keep picking these units off, it will allow for them to have a lot of a smoother ride to victory.
Yeah, it happened a little bit ago, but I wanted to make a joke about instead of Annie going to a conservatory, it seems she's going to a library because she keeps getting shushed. But anyway, we're going here with Mr. Assassin. She's starting to do the fervor on the 2-1. I guess it's the same amount of damage, right? It either goes to the Nexus or it goes to the 2-1. And at least here, like, we're able to kill a unit when we're striking in. So I think that's a heads-up play by Mr. Assassin.
And also just waiting for that Valve Feast, because Valve Feast can slow down aggro a lot more. So I really do like that, holding it out. And yeah, we just play the Ezreal on the side of Broken Kokoro, just understanding that if we can keep getting this removal and dwindling this board, it will be very favorable for us.
Yeah, and like Broken Kokoro definitely has the end game in terms of the Seraphine, in terms of the Ezreal, also just in terms of Song Spinner and like Drum Solo. That as long as they can, get these Mystic Shots, control the board a little bit, I think Broken Kokoro definitely will be able to like coast into the late game. All they need to do is make sure that they can deal with these 2 HP units.
So, okay, I'm like thinking about Mr. Assassin here, and I'm wondering, okay, I'm kind of behind right now. I'm not putting much pressure. How do I really win? And I really wish there was like a cheap draw card because it would make our hands so much easier, but we don't have that. So we really need to think about our top decks and hope that they don't really have the answers, because even though they're at 12 health, we are very, very behind as the Anijin player.
I do want to mention is that as Anijin has sort of come back ever since the seasonal, a lot of people have gone off Decimate. Mr. Assassin is still on 3 Decimate as well as 3 Fervor, so we can definitely go for burn lethals here if we draw into the certain things, put a bit more Nexus damage on fire units, and then hopefully get a Decimate or 2. So it's definitely possible for Mr. Assassin to top deck his way into victory, thinking like a few turns into the future.
I'm really glad you brought that up and told me the deck list, because I think people cutting Decimate is actually wild, because like you're put into situations like this where you need the burn, and you run stuff instead of Decimates like that 3-2 that kind of just has to stick on the board against the Ezreal Serum meta. It just doesn't make sense. But talking about trying to stick on the board, Jin is just gonzo, and the good thing though is we're pushing free damage here, like you were saying, and this is going to be very good for those Decimate outs.
Yeah, I do think the Decimate is always a medical, right? Like, the reason it wasn't in the deck before is because it makes your matchup worse into Ionia. Why let them deny something? But since Ionia is less prevalent now, I think Decimate makes a lot of sense to be as a re-inclusion back into your deck. The Song Spinner here, making you make 3 decisions in quick succession. I missed the first one, but the second one, I presume, is going to be Inspiring. No, it's Hate Spike. That actually makes way more sense. Yeah, these are some good gets from Broken Kokoro, especially with the Seraphine leveled up. We're going to see a lot of doubling up.
And our Israel should be flipped as well. I'm thinking about damage because we can't do it right now. We do have hate spike available, but why would you hate spike anything here? But it'll be definitely flipped next turn, and this is getting very scary for Mr. Assassin. I feel like now we have to really be on a clock here, and because of that, your top decks are getting very, very slim, and you need certain stuff. But here is a decimate. We still have a few chances here.
Yeah, and we've got 2 cards in hand that can burn the Nexus for 1. As long as Broken Kokoro doesn't immediately strike them away from the board, we probably will be able to get at least 1 more damage in just through like these burn units. And if we can top deck another Decimate, we definitely have a chance. Pursuit of Perfection as an option. I doubt it's the right choice, but it's funny to see.
Go get it's absolutely amazing with Seraphine. It's also decent with Edge for lethal win cons. But just getting more removal, basically Kokoro knows, hey, if I have as much removal as possible, buff up my champions, this is really good. And we're just going to see flipping the Ezreal now, not playing with fire, saying, I don't care about any potential more damage. If I don't go down to 4, I'm fine with this.
I really like the Siphoning Strike. I don't know if Israel has lethal in hand without the Siphoning Strike at the moment. I presume you can get lethal with the flow, up trigger of the... what that card is called, the quick attack Seraphine card. But I really like having the Siphoning Strike here, because if they've got a spell, you're not really dealing with a spell. If it's a fervor, you can kill it. If it's a decimate, you're not dealing with it. But if it's another unit in hand, you can kill it, and we can see that Kokoro has got the win.
Yeah, that was definitely a really good game by Kokoro, and we're talking about how basically, this SI version is going to be a lot better into aggro, and that's exactly what happened. It was also kind of sad that hand didn't really do much for, Mr. Assassin, but at the same time, they really tried to do what they could, go for those top deck lines, because like aggro is very important with mapping out what potential top decks you can get. But besides that, yeah, try to do their best, but Kokoro was just the fortunate player there and took the dub for that game.
Yeah, and I think the opening hand, only having one mana card, not having 3 1-mana cards by turn 2, I've got my numbers right there, and having to sort of not be able to proc your Imperial Demolitionist or your Doom Beast in really curvy ways made it sort of difficult to sort of put enough pressure on to allow yourself to get Decimate wins easily. Going into the second game here, we've got the Red Gwen versus Annie Jin, with I think a much better hand from Mr. Assassin here.
Yeah, this is a really good hand. I think if I was Mr. Assassin, I'll be like, okay, where was this last game? What are you trying to do to me, the RNG gods? What's going on? But this is very good. I think if we're trying to really be better into Red Glen, at least we need units, and that's what we have.
Yeah, I mean, the double decimate is something you want to see a little bit later into the game, but having the Boom Crew rookie against a deck that cannot block it right now is definitely a much happier place to be. And Broken Kokoro has a lot of late game and combo-y stuff, but not enough just good units in the hand right now.
So Swids, I know you play a lot of Red Glen. I'm wondering, have you ever played this matchup before, and is it actually favorable for Red Glen?
I think so. I brought Red Gwen to the last 2 weeks, and I fought Annie Jin twice this week, and it was banned every time I Red Gwen. I've not done this matchup, but I'm going to presume that what you want is your hollowed units, and you really want your Gwen. While your Gwen will be stunned a fair bit, just the concept of forcing them to stun on your attack turns is much better for the Gwen player than Mr. Assassin, because if they stun on Mr. Assassin's attack turn, that's allowing them to push more damage. Gwen being able to heal, Gwen not being able to die easily allows her to also threaten leveling up. So I think Gwen was a really good top deck, and as long as you play for Gwen, I'm presuming this matchup's a lot like Pirates. Right, and the way you beat Pirates as Red Gwen is to stabilize the board and then go over the top. And as long as you get through the stabilize the board step, you should feel pretty good.
It's pretty funny as well. I feel like we are kind of concerned about last game with the minimal amount of units from Assassin side, that we're seeing a bit of karma here. Not the card, but the philosophy or mindset, and that's definitely on the side of Kokoro. They don't have any units.
Yeah, but also from the side of Mr. Assassin, like if we don't find a way to proc the Doom Beast, we are in an awkward hand. I did like the hand a lot until we drew the second Decimate. And I'm just seeing from Mr. Assassin, well, we do have a lot of burn. I'm counting 8 plus 4 plus 1. I know my numbers. I think that's 13. So as long as we can get like a hit in with the Boom Crew Rookie, that's down to 13. I think my numbers might be wrong. Why does a law player do math when we have the eye?
I think maths is overrated now. Like, I really do just hope the eye can tell me everything. I'm wondering here, do we actually kind of attack with the Katarina? I feel like we'd actually need that as maybe a unit pocket, but
I like attacking with the Katarina. The Blade's Edge helps quite a bit.
I don't know if we can afford that. Like, maybe we do on the pressure.
I like it. I like trying to threaten the Gwen level up. I like the Gwen healing a lot. I like that we've not got a turn 5 play, so being able to play Katarina on turn 5 is good. I like that if they develop, we can Blade's Edge the Boom Crew Rookie. I quite like the Katarina attack. Even though it can be better to have it in the backline sometimes, it's going to be trading down here pretty much every time anyway. And I do like attacking for a few reasons. I think it's just your best play at the moment with your hand.
I guess also the best line is you can actually have lethal next turn with the dancers, right?
Yeah.
If we can kind of just dwindle down the board and make it a lot easier for the dancer to get through.
I do like the Vile Feast. This Vile Feast is very heads up, thinking that they probably want to play another unit, and you can probably get the Katarina down anyway, as well as like it's basically like playing 2 units in one turn. It's like cheating, right? It's also healing, which is also cheating according to James. But you can remove a unit, you can play a unit in the same thing for 2 mana. It's a pretty good spell, and it's been good ever since Foundations.
So I think we're proactively getting this Katarina off the board, right? Maybe Coco is just not thinking about it, but if
you can't play into a stun like that anymore. That's the thing. If you play Dancers and it gets stunned, that puts you a fair bit back. Okay. I think that's why you don't want to let the Katarina just needlessly die.
So the other question I have though is, don't we want to fork that stun? Even though we don't really get the Katarina, but if we have the Gwen to attack and then we play dancers, we play dancers at the start, they'll have to either stun one anyway. And then if they're not using that, offensively, isn't that a good point of what we're trying to do to stabilize?
I think I agree with that. If I disagreed with that, which I did, I guess I'm disagreeing with myself. I just like the concept of Gwen attacking and Gwen threatening a lot. I think it provides a lot more concern to Mr. Assassin than it would seem. Right, like if they've got spell hands, it doesn't matter. If they've got unit hands, they have to block the Gwen, and then they're not able to push lethal, right? I like just repeatedly attacking with Gwen here. I think it ends up leading yourself to a lot of better lines, even if we have no hollow procs.
And we don't even care about the sun anyway. We're just trying to get the unit off the board and heal up, and we'll just see the Katarina down. I don't really know what Mr. Assassin can do. One thing I do know is Matty Mayo on the side of EU Farmers in the other game is up 1-0 to Lear. So if we win here from Kokoro and they get the other win from Matty Mayo's side, this will be the set win later on.
Yeah, and this was a very quick set. I kind of forgot that we just finished the set. Broken Kokoro has already won. So I'm hoping we're able to see another game here and we don't have to go immediately to a break. But that was just an interesting set. Okay, we've just heard that we're going to get into Maddie versus Leah.
Yep, and we literally told you what was happening. Maddie Mayo is 1-0 against Leah. Both really good players. If you don't know Matty Mayo, they're honestly, I'm going to say it, one of the best South American players. They've been multiple top cutters, which is kind of a regular thing nowadays, but I don't think you've understand how many times this person's been rank 1 and how fast they've done it. This person popped up a lot, especially on my radar when Scion was a thing, and this person could play it almost like just really well. I was always losing to Matty Mayo. They were also on the Sentry version, and the Sentry version wasn't popularized in, so this person is very heads up, and honestly, I can't wait to really watch this match and see Matty Mayo perform as one of the best South American players in this EU format.
Yeah, and on the other side, we have Leah, who you may know from like Meta Report fame. Whenever I like boot up Mastering Runeterra, I always see Leah's name with all the reports that they show. But we're in game now with the Leona Diana, which I wanted to see, versus Silverruption, another deck that I enjoy to see. We might see a Leona coming down here as if Leona is flipped, she should get barrier. But she's not flipped, so she won't get barrier. Such is the way of life.
So, okay, we get the spell shield out, which isn't very important.
I'm just analyzing the board. There's a lot going on here.
There is too much, really.
Yeah, Silverruption might have trouble just with this Sun Guardian. Like, you've got to pull it to the side right now. Like, right now, you can't justify killing with anything. You've got to pull it to the side. And I presume you're trying to threaten forms of Shapestone here. Interesting to see how the attack will go through. I don't know how I feel about the Radiant Guardian. If you're expecting a lot of aggro, it makes a little bit of sense. But it's been a long time since I've seen Radiant Guardian in a Silverruption list.
Definitely. And not only that, but I actually have word from the other matchup, and Cappy took down Void against EU farmers now. So this is literally riding on the back of Matty, Mayo, or Leah. It all comes down to this for who will win the set.
Yeah. This looks interesting. We do have the Overwhelm unit that got nerfed recently, and I definitely remember the name. The Winding Light. There we go. From the side of Leah, which might allow us to definitely threaten some like Overwhelm damage. Especially with these big like Sun Guardian units. I hadn't really considered just how big these units will get and then how even bigger they'll get with the Overwhelm. This could end up making for like a really big single threatening attack from Leah, and then trying to go through like a Doom Beast and Unspeakable Horror Lethal. Interesting to see how this game will play out. We're going to see the Fish Fight, a new addition to a lot of people's Silverruption. I've heard a lot of arguments one way and the other about whether Fish Fight is good in Silverruption or not. People that like it really like it with Zolani, right? Not with Zolani herself, but with the spell. Some people see it as worse Cataclysm. And I'm glad to see Fish Fight versions being played because it's not something I've tested yet, but it's interesting to see.
And Leah, just holding it off, didn't want to take the trade onto the 5-3 Silver Bear, basically enforcing this idea that we're going to play Winding Light. Well, we can't kill right now, especially because Matty Mayo is on 20 health. Not only that, but we also have the Radiant Guardian to kind of make things a lot nicer later on. This is kind of awkward. We are talking about basically Leah being in a favorable position because they had that good amount of Demacian-like units to kind of be a higher end against their own Demacia deck. But the problem right now is we're kind of dwindling our own board, right? And we even don't opt to play for the Winding Light.
Yeah, what I really like here is going for the Diana lane. Diana should be able to challenge something, get a positive trade, and we should be able to trade something with Leona. We should be able to attack pretty freely with I've said this name like 4 times now, Sun Guardian. And I think like dwindling down a Demacian board is one of the best ways of dealing with Demacia, right? You can either go bigger than them, or you can either make sure that their board just doesn't get big to begin with, right? Which you can do with challenges, you can do with bigger stats. So I really like going for the Diana line. Also just allows you to like threaten more stuff, have mana available to do things. I think it's a very good line.
So yeah, I feel like this is the correct line. If we can make, basically Matty Mayo's board just dwindle to a point, it makes very small outs here. But at the same time, I don't know. I feel like I kind of sleep on the power potential of Civ trying to find any comeback win. And even if Leah kind of disrupts his board for it to not exist at the moment, I feel like it allows Matty Mayo to still have a very high chance of winning, especially if they've got the Horde available.
Yeah, it's interesting. Silver at the moment doesn't have an Absolver in hand, so at the moment we can just like chump block them down. They might get a trade positive with the Merciless Hunter, as well as second auction, trying like counting down the landmark. But we still have like at least like 2 more turns, I'm thinking, from the side of Leah before they get the landmark counted down. So if Leah can put enough pressure on to make the counted down landmark spell not give like too much value, I think Leah will still be in a decent position. Maybe I just want to see Leona win. I quite like Leona as a champion. I kind of want to see Leona win.
I'm curious why we didn't Twilight as well. I assume we were at 2 procs, so we could actually flip the Diana here. But because
interesting.
I'm thinking of like trying to kill a Sivir here, but maybe they don't want Zolani. It's just like you're playing with fire because if you don't want Zolani, they've got Sivir, which is like your best way for a win con right now.
My thinking there is that Absolver might not be lethal just yet, but Zolani plus Absolver might end up being lethal. And it might be some sort of weird play around that. But I'm not so sure. I did like flipping Diana, if you've got the capacity to do it. Ravoon here, one of the most powerful Daybreak cards available, should really like help Leah like push through like types of lethals. And we see the challenge from here, trying to kill Leona before she can get the barrier. Decent open attack from Maddie. Is it Maddie? The name of the top is not Maddie.
Maddie Mayo is the player. Just want to bring that back. There isn't like a weird switcheroo going on. It is Matty Mayo. Talking about Mayo, that's going to haunt me in my dreams. But one thing that isn't going to haunt me in my dreams is seeing this board right now. And if I was Sivir Akshan, I would be kind of happy. I don't know. It feels like we're in such a stalemate that I'm just literally waiting for a turn where it's going to be important. And this rally does kind of scream importance here to just keep making this board, a bit happier for Matty Mayo, because that's what you're trying to do, right? You're really trying to make this as favorable as possible. We even have like Shape Zone single lines I really like as well. This is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think the single will definitely be like the most important card to see how it's going to be used at the moment. Because if Aaliyah got off the overwhelm thing, it would be like very scary for Matty Mayo. So like making sure that the board is dwindled so that Winding Light doesn't like threaten, if not lethal, just like a board clear or awkward blocks. I really like this rally and attack. Even if it's not combo-y, it's not running like the Absolver, you're not doing anything with Solani, it's a really good rally. We're seeing the blocks here. I think this is a pretty heads-up block. You're playing around shapes, you're playing around a few things.
I do agree as well. I don't know what else you want. You could trade the 2/2 Owl, but I mean like that Owl is so dapper. I just want it on my bench, right? I always want this card to kind of just chill on the board and never let it die. Because like that thing's like wearing a sweater, right? It just looks so dapper.
I will say the Owl is pretty dapper. It's definitely a cool looking card, and I'm glad it's found its inclusion into this like dual Daybreak and Nightfall deck.
Yeah, I think people were sleeping on this card as well, not only because its appearance is so dapper, but like also because you couldn't really evaluate it because it has like this Daybreak and Nightfall thing, but it's found a place in Nightfall as a card, and just also making this archetype a thing. Like so small cards like that have dual keywords like Daybreak and Nightfall allows this Leona Diana deck to get a lot better.
Yeah, but with how the blocks ended up turning out, if my English is correct there, we will have like a pretty decent overwhelm from Leah here with the Winding Light. Like this is like a big attack. I think we've forgotten a lot about how Winding Light is like a really strong unit. And while like the Aphelios deck is sort of like fallen off because of the nerf, and also just for like meta reasons, I think this is going to be like a really strong attack from the side of Leah here.
It's really strong. We also pick up the dual, the Twilight again. Having 3 of these things, what is it? It's like a ball, like a foyer. It's like a I don't know, a dance party going on. They look all dapper. But one thing that will also be dapper is Winding Light, making these all just a very aggressive potential chance to make it lethal. Not sure if we have lethal right now, but one thing I know is they might need to trade down the Sivir, and that gets really scary because it makes the outs for Matty Mayo very, very slim.
You see what I see anymore? I see an Underdusk. And I see an even bigger board in like a couple of burst speed actions. And while we're definitely going to be able to do the second Akshan landmark, I presume drawing 2 just to find any sort of fundamental for an out. I just don't know how it's going to happen. Right. The Heedless Resurrection is an inclusion that I've seen a few people try and run. I'm not sold on the card yet, but I can see why a lot of people are running it, as well as the combat cooks like cheapen the Heedless Resurrection. So even if Sivir dies here, we can get Sivir back. But this is just like, this is a fair bit of damage. I saw a negative 40 on the Nexus there. Thank God it's there, because I wouldn't be able to do math otherwise.
Yeah, this has to be lethal here. I didn't even see it, Spids, but you were talking about the Unto Dusk. If they block, you're only really blocking what? Like 7, maybe 10 damage. Not enough, I think. Even this is kind of too powerful right now. I'm so glad we have the eye, and that is just lethal. Shapestone doesn't do anything here, and we don't even need the Unto Dusk. Really well played by Lair, and I think this ties it up to be 1-1. So still getting back into the game, and this is definitely getting a close set to take it for either EU Farmers or ABG.
I would have loved to see the Unto Dusk there. I don't think there's a way playing Unto Dusk allows them to get lethal somehow, and I just wanted to see a big number. I've not seen Unto Dusk Winding Light for a long, long time, and with 3 dapper-looking owls, what could go wrong?
Yeah, I just want to see BM as well. Why not? You know?
Yeah.
Like, throw an emote in there. Make them take to the next game. It makes a lot of sense. Mental warfare. Be a bit of a Muhammad Ali for Runeterra, you know? If you can get into the head, how else are you going to lose the game? But yeah, I think like that was really well played. There was a lot of like weird stalemates, and Lair kind of knew that their win con was Winding Light. Took it a bit slower. We were talking about how that turn with playing it on 6 mana might have been correct not to do, and I think they got really rewarded for that.
Yeah, I think that heads up play of realizing that if you're going to win this game, you're going to be doing it through like a big Winding Light attack. You may as well make that big Winding Light attack actually have that big adjective and not just be like a medium sort of like attack. So I did like keeping it for a while. But now we've got Akshan Lee versus, again, Sivir Akshan.
Okay, so I know you play a lot of Sivir Akshan. I know I
play a little bit of Sivir Akshan in EMEA.
And I know I play a lot of Lee Sin. And I know one thing. Sivir Akshan dislikes Lee Sin. Not because they're blind, but because they can kick. And kicking is very, very important because Sivir does not want to see that at all.
Yeah. It can be interesting. If you put a vulnerable on Lee Sin, pull it to the side and try and go for a wide thing, it can happen. But like the fact that Lee Sin can just like attack Sivir, attack Akshan, attack your big things and trade off with them without with your only way of like dealing with it being quicksand and like concerted, it can be like pretty awkward from the side of Sivir Akshan. And no Akshan here is also pretty sad from the side of Maddie.
Oh, so this is kind of a really nice play by Lair. So I think like playing Akshan on 2 is almost always correct, and normally when you don't play it on 2, you can kind of throw that idea if you're Matty married that they might not have Akshan. But the problem is you just throwing your 2-1 into that gives this Akshan more of an ability to get through certain things. Right now, we've only got a 0-3 Broadwing with Formidable, but if they had a Vagabond on the side of Matty Mayo, it doesn't matter, right? Because we have the Fixum and we can kind of get through and get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I do like the way weapons have sort of changed how a lot of decks have come around, and not just like the Hookmaster, but being able to use the weapon to like proc Akshan's grappling hook, being able to use the weapon to add things to Lee Sin, make him more than just like a barrier and challenger, which has definitely not been in the past. It's definitely not had like the overwhelm keyword for half of the game. But anyway, having weapons be a modal way of playing with, I said modal a lot today, playing with the landmarks, playing with the way the board and the game state interacts. I really like the addition of weapons to both of these decks.
And even though the Aegis shows that it has 4 health, Formidable doesn't mean it gets to trade up at all. But it does have value now because you can trade through the Akshan, and this is looking a bit awkward. Like, I don't really want to be using my Absorber here. I feel like the Vagabond is also not the best play. Our hand could get a lot better. We really want Resonating Strike as a card. And that's what you really want to do in this matchup, right? If we do have stuff like Resonating Strike and just go for the Sivir, you're kind of winning well, especially with no Akshan on the side of them. But I think Lair is just playing it a bit slow. And I'm very interested in not seeing that Akshan there with the weapon, but I guess there's a bit of merit.
Yeah, I think there's logic both ways. Do you ever play Absolver there to kill the Broadwing? Or is that like always wrong? Do you want to always keep Absolver for the lethal? You're the one that plays Lee Sin Akshan, not me.
It's close. You could definitely argue it because you do need to play spells to even level up Lee Sin. And I don't hate that, especially because I can then play my Akshan and get the ball rolling that way. So I think so. I feel like there's a lot of ways Sivir Akshan can kind of stall out, and you're not really going for a big combo turn. And that's why you are kind of very, what's the word? Very conservative with your absolvers, right? Is because you want to go for that big OTK turn. But unlike other Demacia decks, this one does have interaction, and you're not really going to get that absolver turn as fast as you want.
Maddie May has definitely had like a pretty aggressive opener. Not the most aggressive, there wasn't an Akshan, but being able to like put the Jural, I forget what the weapon, the Aegis, on the Broadwing and having the Sivir, having the vulnerable, Maddie is definitely in like a pretty decent position. If they can trade down the board this turn, trade down the board the next turn, they're going to be able to do like a really good attack the turn after. I know I'm thinking very far into the future, but I'm just looking at Maddie. Maybe it's like a little bit of a Sivir Akshan fan, and I'm hoping that he can pull this through.
Yeah, I'm honestly, this is looking kind of bad for Leah. I do so like there is merit for keeping that absolver, just for the potential for that comeback turn. But I'm really trying to figure out this matchup should be favored, but it just doesn't feel great. I don't know if that's due to the experience of Messi Mayo or the hand of Leah, but I can't say this hand is bad. Like you had Archon on too, and you have Lee Sin right now, so. Maybe this matchup's not as bad as people think, and we might see it today.
Yeah, I do think Leah's hand is interesting. Do we know how many spells have been played? Because my thinking is it actually hasn't been that many. We had a bunch of units instead of ways to proc Lee Sin, so it might actually be like harder to level up Lee Sin. We've always got the 2 from the Akshan landmarks, and we're going to have the Absolver eventually. And I think we played 1 more earlier. We might get the Ting. I think that's the guy's name.
I think we've only played 1 spell, right? And that was from the Horde.
I think because we didn't play the Absolver, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but the whoosh is going to be 2, so that's something. That's almost there.
We're slowly chugging along, we can say. But Maddie's going to probably have a pretty large attack here. I doubt, Userlani, you might develop the combat cook. I don't know if you're thinking about like concussives or something, but you might be able to play the combat cook and just threaten a lot. Another Akshan though. Wow, that is a point of interaction at the very least, a grappling hook. If you put the weapon on, then you can grappling hook. But I don't know if that's the sort of thing you want to be looking for. I really think you want to be finding like these spells, these points of interaction, especially Sonic Wave or Lee Sin Sonic Wave, right?
Definitely. So you can try and go for the Sivir here, but the thing is, Akshan's just dying anyway, so this grappling hook won't be available. We might want to be drawing here. But no, we opt out not to draw. We need to play this Akshan and get a Lee Sin rolling, I think. It's probably the Lee Sin, maybe play the Akshan next turn. I don't know if we can pop it, though. It's really close too, but at the moment, we need some leeway here. If we get momentous, I think there's a potential chance to win, right? Like, I'm saying all this stuff because I'm thinking, how can I find the draw spell? Or maybe proc the spell shield to try and go for lethal. And we're almost there, but not quite yet.
This Lee Sin is interesting. That was under deny for concerted, right? I'm not missing something here. Is that correct? It's interesting.
So we couldn't even save it. Well, we couldn't even save it. But I think Leah might be in a position where they can't really play around concerted anyway, right? So if we're saying, hey, I'm just going to be like, it's fine, I'm going to be losing to concerted anyway, I'm going to get this read out of you, and when I get that read out of you, my next turn is going to be a lot better. And I don't even think this Lee Sin's leveling now, so we just have to be protective and stabilize. But this Vixen getting so much work in here, getting the Sivir out, and now this is a Zolani line for Messi Mayo.
I would like to say, as an addendum to what I said just a second ago, he definitely had a hand read. There's not a concerted strike, because there is not a concerted strike in the deck.
Right.
There's a fish fight, but if you're fish fighting, it's like an equal trade, right? Because you can't do the weapon one at that point. So I think the Lee Sin was definitely fine, right? If they're not running any copies of Concerted, you can definitely do it.
Okay. And that makes interactions so much more awkward. So this matchup's shaping a lot better now. We even have the Clicksand here for any aggression on the side of Matty. Wow, another deep mid. This is going to be huge. It allows us to actually level up our Lee Sin. Lee Sin's been chilling for too long. Says, hey, I want some spells, and this is what we're getting. This is like good. We can get a Palm. I don't even think Palm's great though. We've got the Clicksand. There's like weird lines here where maybe fish fight gets value if they only Clicksand and then you fish fight afterwards. But you just have Notify. I'm not really sure how Matty Mayo actually wins this one here.
Yeah, I think getting the Lee Sin down without having the Concerted Strike, my matchup idea for this completely changed. Getting the Lee Sin down, being able to trade with this barrier unit, being able to threaten lethals, like block really effectively. This Lee Sin's going to be like a real pain in the rear. While Matty definitely has lines of winning, right? Like this is a decently big attack. We've got Absorber. We can top deck another Sivir. Matty will have like a tough time, and I'm really liking Leah's position at the moment.
All we have to worry about now is like rally on the side of Leah. That is like, we can even hold up deny and pretend, hey, if they do have the rally, I'm all good. So we might just see it a bit slow here. This maps is going to be a bit like troublesome for Leah, thinking, okay, do I actually need to play anything here? If they have this rally, am I doomed? But I'm like pretty sure it's okay. One thing I know is like you're saying, there's no Concerted Strike. So literally all we have to do is play around deny, which is the right of negation. And this is very, very heads up because Leah is saying, I don't want you to heal at all. If you do have that deny, I need to be dealing 11 with my Lee Sin. So I really, really like this. This also allows, you being into rally all right. So we're just going to see it kind of slow and we'll probably see Leah's turn coming to be relevant in a moment.
Yeah, and the landmark's going to count down. Leah's got like all of the options in the world. Is looking at a hand of 9 cards that all look pretty good at the moment. And I think Leah will feel very, very happy at the moment. What is Maddie's best line here? What can Maddie attempt to do to try and deal with what Leah's just about to throw at him?
I think it's the surrender button. I don't really
going
know
straight for the jugular.
Like, no, seriously, like the Notify is here. Like, I guess we have to pretend that they just have nothing, right? But Notify will deny. There's just so much goodness, and Matty is going to play for that out. Matty is a great player, so they're never going to surrender until it's over. But we'll see this fish fight and this Notify giving you flowers to the face for that surrender button, because that's what it's going to be. This Notify will seal the deal. There is no, Concerted. There is no real anything, and this will be the game on the Lee Sin side.
I wonder if there was anything Maddie could have done differently, because getting that Lee Sin down and letting Lee Sin trade into the Sivir changed like the way I thought about this entirely. Maybe we should have seen that ahead of time, especially not knowing the Concerted. But this does not look like a business angle, and it seems that Leah would just win. Not a business angle for the Sivir action player. Of course, I'm rooting for Sivir action, but yeah, well played by Leah, and definitely like a really strong game.
It's yes, this is lethal. Even the single doesn't do anything. Like we were saying, Leah was being heads up, stopping that healing. We could single on the 1-1, but I don't think really that does anything because you have the Absolver, and that is lethal for Leah. Taking it out for ABG Demacia, and I think ABG Demacia has kind of looked as underdogs. You have one really good player like Pepsi Cola in that team, and you just go, hey, I don't know anyone else. And well, you might do now. They just took out one of the best players you could say for South America, maybe even for Americas, in fact. And I think that puts them in the lead and being ahead of other players in that group like Seraphine Fan Club, which they beat last week.
Yeah. This is shaping to be like a really interesting group, and ABG Demacia is definitely making a name for themselves, showing that maybe the Demacia region is kind of cool, much to some's like irritation.
It's definitely it. And I think with that, we might be going to a break. I'm not too sure if we're speed running through it, but we'll be here with the next round in a few minutes. So catch you then. account sharing. Welcome everybody back to round 2 for Aegis this week. If you don't know, we have 3KG and they'll be versing Cope. We'll see what will happen today. Maybe Cope will not be coping and they'll win a match. If you don't know, they kind of struggled last week, went 0-3, which is unfortunate, but I'm happy to see them play on the broadcast today because they're really good players and I want them to do well, and we might see it today. Spids, how are you looking forward to these matches?
I'll be honest, this is the one I was looking forward to the most, not to make any discrimination between them. I'm a big fan of Copian card gamers. I'm a big fan of RoboMaster, and while he's not playing today, they're sort of like my pet team for this group. Even if you're sponsoring a group, sorry, I've already made allegiance to RoboMaster's team. But Three Kangaroos Gaming is also a team I'm really interested to see, not just because they got Kangaroo in the name and we're both OS players, but, TKG's got a bunch of lore, and I'm pretty sure they're TKG because they're 3KG.
They are. There's like a weird sponsorship going on that they're not actually affiliated, but at the same time, they're kind of representing it. So, pretty interesting. We talked about RoboMaster being on the team, and I think they are one of the best players for Cope. So a bit sad to not see them play, but they're very underrated. 3 top cuts in a row with timelines. Not much people have done that with the same deck. The only person that really comes to mind is Sir Donald. So I really wish I could see RoboMaster play, but we also have some really, really good players like Jinden as well. So with that, I think we'll be seeing the deck list and seeing what spice they have brought today.
Talking about Jinden, we do have spiders. Sort of like a blast from the past. Like spiders has always crept up and then crept down, then crept up and then crept down. And we're seeing spiders back here again. As we were saying in the last set, aggro has sort of for this week of Aegis, sort of been the main thing people are thinking and talking about. So bringing spiders as yet another option for aggro is a pretty interesting choice.
I definitely agree. So you're kind of just finding that third aggro deck and you can kind of do anything for it. And this is something, pretty standardized. Besides the Spellslinger and the Hookmaster, I think those are new additions. Spellslinger makes a lot of sense because of the spider keyword, and it is a stun. So it's also just a cheaper sentry. You can kind of get good tempo plays in. You can do a lot of damage with it if you're smart about it. And Hookmaster, it's just a really, really good card. So I think it's a very, very nice bring if you're trying to go for a triple aggro, and it will be interesting to see how it goes.
I really like the Spellslinger. We've seen Elise so much throughout Legends of Runeterra, but 90% of the time, she's just a 2-3 that summons a 1-1. But having 3 copies of Elise and having a bunch of spiders, getting the Elise flip, I think, is a really fun way to play the game. And having the Spellslinger here is a cheaper way of doing the Sentry thing, while also having the spider keyword, just like Sentry, but a little bit cheaper, I think is really powerful. What do you think about the brothers bond? It's something that I've seen time here, time there. That's definitely a phrase. Sometimes is what I mean to say. Sometimes it's in the list, sometimes it's not. I want to hear your thoughts on brothers bond.
Yeah, so like Spiders is a 39 card deck majority of the time, and you always have this weird one off. A lot of people opt for Brothers Bond. Other times it's weird stuff like Unto Dusk. There's also maybe another card that you could play instead of it, but it really is a 39 card deck, and Brothers Bond is just a potential decimate, and if you're smart about it early, it can really push in the damage.
Yeah, I do like Brothers Bond. Like when you frame it as like 2-mana decimate, it's like 1/3 the price of decimate. That's pretty cheap. And it can definitely do some pretty interesting things.
Yeah, it was a bit awkward with the maps before, but they kind of realized the the mana prices have gone up in value because Decimate is 6 mana, so makes that metaphor kind of easy to say. It is like a third of a Decimate for the price at least. So yeah, I do like the Brothers Bond inclusion. I think it's a lot nicer as well when you have Spellslinger because you want to force out potential more damage, right? And it allows you to do that. So yeah, I there's nothing much more to say besides bringing the trusty old spiders, which a lot of people haven't really seen recently when it's been since it's been here in beta. And I think it's like a very niche bring, like we've said with a lot of things, but it'll find some light if you're really just trying to target Pantheon.
One thing I really like is if you look next to the deck list, you can see like the mana ratios, thanks to Intera.ai. And I just like seeing like this little like 12, 13, 12 of 1, 2, and 3. I think that's really funny to see. Obviously the 3s are mostly, they're like half spells, they're not just units, but just like really cool just to see like the 3 columns being popularized.
Yeah, don't need a 4 or 5 drop. Running 6 drops now, unfortunately. Wish that was a bit closer to the 5 drop, but that's what happens with nerfs. And I'm not too sure what the next deck is, but I'm happy to tell if we do see the graphic for it soon. And if not, at the same time, we run, the typical 1 drop package for Noxus. And this is very common, and it's a similar thing why people are playing EMEA Swain is because it's like the flavor of just being good into Ezreal, Seraphine, and Vayne, right? The Ezreal Seraphine's a bit scarier because you don't have Flock, but I'm going to reiterate it again. This is why Brothers Bond is good. Because it really stops potential value trades with Seraphine. And I think that's like a pretty good thing to have in mind because if you can't really kill it with the Flock that you don't run, Brothers Bond is a good alternative, and Seraphine's the best way to kind of stabilize in that matchup. You don't really play for Ezreal, you don't really play for the other champion. You really, really want to just play for the stabilizing into like a sputtering song spinner that levels it up, and then you can kind of pop off.
Yeah, I do hope we can go to the next deck. There we are. We found it by 3kg. They brought Seraphine Nami. Even though Nami's been nerfed, Nami can definitely find some interesting places. We've seen Nami like test out a few places. I know Arcado was trying out with like Varus, but I think Seraphine with PMZ is another way you can go for it. There's a lot of options for Nami in a post-nerf world, and this is one of them. Running Aegon, which I think was a really cool addition.
Yeah, so the sad thing about this is you running no protective spells with it, which makes it awkward, especially with the Nami nerf, that this level up with the Nami becomes very, very more problematic. However, on the contrary with that, Seraphine being able to double everything kind of removes that sadness of not having, health buffs and then just making it even more explosive. You kind of double up on your spells, and you just push a lot more damage on one particular unit with your elusives, and it's kind of just, goodbye for the opponent. And we're running very, very typical TF Fizz shenanigans. Very similar because it's a PNZ bilge region. You have improvements. Really good with the Seraphine lines here, so you can get double Burblefish, maybe certain double Shellies out if you need, and yeah, you have Flash of Brilliance, you have the Song Spinners. It's a very explosive deck, and even though the Nami kind of loses the value with not being able to give it the health buffs anymore. You do just consolidate that with the Seraphine, which is very, very important.
One thing I've just noticed in this list is that's not running Poro Cannon. Poro Cannon has been like a staple of this sort of like, at least from my understanding, of this elusive Bilgewater buff archetype, right? Like every time this sort of idea of Nami and PNZ has been around, it's because of Poro Cannon. I don't know if Poro Cannon has fallen off for some reason in this deck. Do you have a thought on this, EMEA?
So I've built something similar, and I think it's just like deck space. You want to be running like a lot of good stuff, and Poro just gets kind of a bit awkward because you also have the discard, right? It means your Fleet Admiral Shelly lines are a lot harder to kind of win as a win con, but you can generate stuff. You've got Double Trouble. You have Acorn already. We could probably go to Tulov maybe instead of Heavy Metal, but you might actually just want to be better into a just be better into General and go more spell heavy so you can go for that Nami. But I think with that, we're probably going to go into the match now, or the pick and ban phase, and we'll be talking about these matchups. Spids, this is what we're definitely going to see. Aggro versus a really interesting lineup from Gore.
Yeah, Glore's lineup sort of confuses me. We've got this combo deck. We've got, I guess, Anti-Jin as a combo aggro deck. And then we've got, if you want to stretch it, you can say combo, but it's definitely more mid-range. I think this is like a very specific target on what?
On Vayne.
On Vayne? Does Ash LeBlanc beat Vayne?
It should do. Freezes?
Oh, not Vayne. Oh, yeah, no, Vayne makes sense. No, I thought you said Seraphine. My mind is somewhere else in the world anymore. I do apologize.
It's fine. Yeah, this is such a weird lineup. Like, what am I doing with this combo Seraphine deck into Vayne, though? Like, surely I'm not winning that one, right?
Doesn't Anti-Jin lose to Vayne as well? Am I tripping?
I don't know if you're tripping, but like maybe. I think it has merit. But doesn't matter what we care about. The Seraphine Nami, they're gonna ban it anyway. Really interesting. I don't think that's the pick at all. Okay, I'll be honest. I'm
a little bit lost, but I'm sure there's logic to it, and I'm sure they've looked at the matchup tables. They've scrimmed this a lot. I think they know what they're doing, and we just don't have experience with watching any of these decks.
You think so?
Especially this Nami one.
I mean, like, Make It Rain is scary, but aren't we trying to be good as a Seraphine?
I guess the PNZ version of Seraphine is a bit different, is what I'm going to... PNZ version of Seraphine? Let me rephrase this. The Nami version of Seraphine, I presume, is a little bit different. Like, if you've got Heavy Metal, you've got Make It Rain, which I think was in the deck, and then you might be able to flood the board with early Burbles, depending on how the build is going. But I don't know. No Poro Cannon means blockers are also less common to find.
It's like... So the problem is with that is traditionally Nami decks really struggle to actually beat aggro in general. And then Seraphines also struggle to beat Nami aggro in general. And the main reason for that, especially for a Nami deck, is because you don't want to be playing your spells early. You don't really want to be on the back foot because it doesn't allow you to flip your Nami. So, I don't know. I find that ban very, very weird. And you're versing very sketchy matchups now. You don't want to be playing aggro into really a mid-range deck. Because traditionally mid-range will just beat aggro because they go bigger and they can trade easier and faster. And that Anti-Jin is just like more of a powerhouse. So I don't know. I think Jinden might be, crying if this doesn't go their way, because I don't think that's a good pick at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a thought like 30 seconds ago, and I don't remember what the thought was anymore. But we're now in game, and we've got Anti-Jin versus Spiders, aggro versus aggro. Do you have a thought on who might be favored here?
Yeah, so okay, so I'm trying to think about it. I think it might be Anti-Jin, just because of the better aggro deck.
I was thinking that the fearsome keyword is probably pretty good against a bunch of these skill-based, not particularly courageous Anti-Jin cards. I'm just seeing the hand, and I'm not seeing a single fearsome blocker. and I'm seeing Jinden's hand, and I'm seeing 2 fearsomes and a mega fearsome in the form of Stygian. Mega fearsome is definitely a term that people use.
It's mega fearsome. I mean, like, that thing gets mega fearsome for that one turn, and then it just becomes chilling. So I don't hate that terminology, but opting to not really do any fearsome stuff and just play a good unit does a similar thing with the click attack. So I do like it. You could have got fearsome anyway. Yeah, this might also come down to who had the attack token.
Okay, yeah. Attack token can often matter in these like aggro mirrors, right? Like who can hit their power spike turns, especially Annie-Jin, which is very big on power spike turns with stuns. I think the attack token logic will be very, very important. But double stuns here on the side of Glaw can be really strong if they map this out like pretty well, and we're going to assume that they will.
And yeah, Jinder now just being defensive on this turn, I think it's good. You know, we're going for a Stygian line later, and we just want to trade down, make minimal damage happen. So I don't mind it. There's not really anything else you can do here besides, like, you know, a Stygian, but not even a Stygian, sorry, a Stalking Shadows. But I think Glaw is just going to be attacking. We have good trades out. We'll be fine. Like, the fearsome's still on the board, but getting rid of majority here and pushing at least, you know, 2 to 4 damage is very important for Glaw.
I'm really happy with Jinden's position. They've got late game with the late game for an aggro deck with double Stalking Shadows. They've got a lot of fearsome. They've got the House Spider, which is, I think, pretty premium in an aggro mirror, right? Because it blocks 2 things. It's cheap. It's also like pretty well statted, considering it's a 2-mana card. I really like Jinden's position here. It'll be interesting to see how the game turns out, and it'll probably be over in like 3 turns, maybe 4. But still be very interesting nonetheless.
Late game's important, you know, especially when your late game isn't something stupid like Karma and Spiders. You can kind of like be fine with your late game only being Stalking Shadows. So it will just be more of like a combo potential as well, especially when you have Doom Beast, because that will break the mirror. You can get double.
Oh, you go.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, finish it off. Double Doom Beast will finish or stabilize mirrors to a point. So these stalkings should gain a lot of value around this time.
I just want to make a little aside that my first ever like deck that I played in Legends of Runeterra was an aggro deck with Karma in it. It was a Spider aggro deck with Karma. And you saying that brought me back so many memories. But back into the actual video game that we have in front of us. Jin here is probably a really good top deck. Jin will be hard to kill. And Jin being able to stun, being able to poke the Nexus every so often with his little gun should be like really, really strong. And also Tippers might come out, and Tippers should also be pretty strong. So looking at Glaw's position, it's not as lack of late game heavy as I was saying a few seconds ago.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think. Like, we've got the stalking out, and this rearguard is pretty good. We're really trying to make out this turn be aggressive as possible, right? Because the more aggression you can have, especially getting before their turn 5 attack token, is very important, as it allows them to not really get back into the game. Aggro mirrors are kind of all about snowballing. And when you can kind of put as much pressure as possible, it's going to come down to the wire to the point where they might be blocking. But with saying that, Jin is like the weirdest aggro card you could have. But it also is such a good blocker, and that might actually be very, very impactful here.
Yeah, Jin will definitely like warp the game around him, both in terms of how Gloria's going to play, trying to get stunned, trying to get the pellets to the face. While also being like the biggest unit they've got, the capacity to block. I think Jinden's only like 4 strength unit will be Stygian, so it will always get a positive trade here, like this one here. And it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. Going down to 8 HP is quite low. It does put you in like double decimate range, it puts you in further decimate range, as well as like Doom Beast ranges, which you have to think about a lot when you're fighting spiders. But Glaw here, having 2 stuns, should have like a really large attack. 3 if Jin pops off.
That is huge. Top decking that Solari Sunhawk is very important. Jinden now, can kind of play with fire, keep up maybe 3 mana for the fervor in case of getting lethal. But is this on the side of lethal if Jinden just hangs out? I don't know, right? Because like we want them to play units. Right now we're only dealing 8. We have 11 with the fervor. We have some room with the saboteur, which makes it up to 14. So this is actually very good for Gore, right? We can play the saboteur here. That will be actually pushing damage, and then we can get the other stun out. And there we go. We have a unit out, and it allows us to play our stagehand for even more potential.
Yeah, I do really like the stun here. Like, you're going to be taking a lot of damage. I think the stun here is very heads up. I don't know what Jin's at. Do both things get stunned here? Jin, without being able to click on the card, I have no clue how to evaluate what Jin's doing.
Maybe we could get one from production. I'm not sure, but it might be flipping now. So let's say it does flip. That is almost 14. That will be 14, right? Are we not just stagehanding here? It's at 5, so it would be flipping because it would be free, right? Or am I tripping?
I don't know. I think 5 means that on the 6th one he'll throw something out, right?
Yeah.
So it should be, yeah.
Well, can you please play the stagehand? Okay, cool. Now we know. And we're flipping Annie.
I'm not seeing it on the stack. Maybe we're wrong. Who knows?
I think it is.
No.
Oh no. Okay.
I'll go on the stack in half a second, but you know.
Wait, so they are at 2 out of 3 for the proc. We're dealing at least 4, 6, 7, 9 plus the 1, which means they're at 10 here.
Yeah, and the board also gets like half cleared with the Jin attack skill, not the origin skill. Going down to 10, I'm going to double check if they're running Decimate. Not going down to 10, sorry, going down to 4, taking 10. But yeah, this is like looking pretty good for Glor. It becomes, can they find the cards? They also should win on their next attack. I would struggle to imagine not winning on their next attack. And actually, the fervor should be lethal. And
talking about if they have Decimate, there is a top deck for Glor. Doesn't matter what Jinden does at all. Tries to get out of fervor range, but you play literally any card. This Decimate from the top deck will be it. Jinden now coping, wondering, how is my out? They run Decimate. What can I go for? Smoking that cope.
You have to go for a Doom Beast line, right? Try and find Doom Beast. You have to have a hand raid. I think the Doom Beast is the best choice. By have a hand raid, I just mean like play to your best out. You're not probably getting damage in through like striking. So I think you look for a Doom Beast, you get 2 damage from the Doom Beast, and you try and get 2 fervors through. I think that's your best line from the side of Jinden here. And we just have to hope and cope.
Is that it? But no.
That is not. Yeah, that's notably not a Doom Beast. It looks a bit different from a Doom Beast, and that's because it's not a Doom Beast. And we can just see Glor going for the lethal anyway.
And that's it. The hammer comes down, not from Slain though, but from Glor with this Annie Jin Decimate. So really well played. I was freaking out. Them like playing that, I don't know, gonna attack and then not playing the stagehand and just going on and off, maybe doing a bit of maths was really freaking me out. But I'm really glad that they kind of got that win out. Very interesting as well. I don't know if we could say that Annie Jin is favored there. I think it was more literally about the attack token, and that's a very commonality with aggro mirrors. And even with the game in general, it's like a small percentile chance, but it like being first, like in chess, it gives you a bit of an advantage, and we definitely saw that. Now, speaking about other games, we have the Ash on the side of Glor with a run back from Cope Jinden Spider.
Right, you said Spider.
Spiders. And I just got from production the updates as well, and it looks like Anarchy is slightly 0-1 from Sisho, and Tricky is actually ahead of the side of 3KG. So they're kind of basically back and forth. Everyone's a bit 1-0 at the moment, and it could go either way.
As you were saying that, Anarchy went 1-1. So now it's tied in the Anarchy set, and back into the game in front of our screens. We've got a really interesting board occurring where Glor does not have a 3-drop. They've got the knife. Culling Strike. There we go. But Cope Jinden's got like a really good hand, and well, I doubt they'll get the Elise flip just because of the Culling Strike. You can at least threaten it and get the strike in, and I'm pretty hopeful on the side of Jinden.
Yeah, so Glor, a bit empty here. Doesn't actually really have the units you want or units at all. The Assessor doesn't really do anything. You don't really want to be playing it at 4 just to block. And half guard's going to come way too late. So if we can kind of steamroll here right now, also set up a good open, it gets pretty favorable. Jinden now, really weird. I don't know why we don't go for the Skitterer. There might be some lines here. Maybe the Ice Veil, but I don't know. I feel like the Skitterer must be the best play there.
I was thinking the Skitterer as well. I think the Skitterer allows you to threaten a lot of damage. I think the Skitterer allows you to play at least on your next turn, and then they have to do a Culling Strike on like their attack turn, which I think is a bit worse for them. And yeah, but that being said, Glor can only play 1 unit this turn. Maybe they can get like they're not going to do the can't block unit, so I think they can just play 1 unit this turn. They are going to play the can't block unit. Okay, you can get a positive trade if you use the flash freeze, but I'm not so sure about the can't block unit. What do you think about this, EMEA?
You might want to just be playing the Assessor. It's like really awkward, right? The weapon has some merit. Like you put it on the weapon, you can bring down with the 1/1, but it just doesn't do much. I'm also still thinking about Jinden's play before, and it just I don't know. It makes like a lot of less sense if you top deck the 2-drop, but you did get the Stygian, so there's some value. And Glor now playing with this idea of challenging and not making them develop at all. Sadly, they don't realize that Jinden doesn't actually have units they want to play. And right now, we just get the Skitterer out so we can get the value with the Stygian.
I'm going to check Glor's deck list to see, because since they're running Hearthguard, I'm going to presume they're not running Gift of the Hearth Blood, which may mean that Glor's not running any healing, and that can be definitely an important thing to be thinking about. We're seeing 10 burn in the hand of Jinden right now, so if they can put them down to 10 health, which is pretty easy for like an aggro deck to do. Like right now, this is lethal if there's no healing, provided, obviously, fervor isn't guaranteed.
I don't think they run Tavern Keeper either. That's like the very old thing to do, especially because Trapper got way back, buffed. So it's been kind of a staple ever since, and even actually made that archetype to what it is. If you don't really know the history of the game, Ash kind of struggled as an archetype to be good. And then they buffed Trapper, and it actually just made the deck insane, which was really weird because it's just a 3-mana free. And back then, getting a 1-mana 5/5 was very important early. But right now, you don't really have those type of, game states with like certain stylistic matchups and it being as important. But one thing I know which is important is getting this Decimate down and having this further up, especially to maybe play around any potential stuff here.
So I don't want to like make Doom say everything. What I am going to say is there's no way to interrupt lethal at the moment because there's no healing in the deck of Glor. You don't even need to rely on fervor. You can do things that are uninteractive, such as Doom Beast and stuff. I don't know why you don't just go for the Decimate here, but I guess it doesn't really matter. There's no healing in the side. But yeah, I think this was sort of quite likely to happen. Glor's deck struggles to have like a decent 1 to 3. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they get the Omen Hawk into a 2-drop into Trapper. But most of your cards are like 4 or more or their spells. And Jinden just had like a really good opener, right? As with the burn over the top that you need with an aggro deck.
And there it is. Another Decimate to end the game there. And that now ties it up. Similar fashion, they both died a Decimate. Don't know if that's poetic, maybe. I don't know. But good to see the aggro deck finally getting back in there and Spiders gaining the win. So really good to see. That means, what is our last final matchup? It's Ash versus the...
I don't remember what was not banned.
I can't either. It was really weird bans. What was going on?
Misfortune. Yeah.
I maybe. Well, we'll see it anyway. Probably need to remember, but it's Anijin. That's right. Okay. This must be favorable for Anijin, right? Just with
I can't imagine it not being. I think Anijin's got very similar ideas to what like Spiders wanted to do. You've got this early aggression. The stuns, I think, will be even more impactful if you can like stun like their 4-drop, their 5-drop, which might be their only play on one of their turns, right? And while we might see do you even Ice Veil here? It's not. I guess it's like you're not going to do it a different turn, so you probably just do, but it's not the best Ice Veil I've seen in the world.
You kind of just need to fight for board, I think. Even though you can't really, but you also just don't want to take damage.
You can skirmish the Annie here, which is interesting. Skirmish being a new addition, not only to the game, but also to this deck. It's basically like single combat, but it destroys a weapon, is my memory of what this card does. It's a Noxus 3 mana, and it's the first card in Glaw's hand. But you can open attack here, because it's free, you may as well.
I also have updates from production, and Tricky did get the win over 3KG. So that means that no matter what on the game, on the other game, it kind of comes down to who wins here. Is it Glor or Jinden? We don't really know the other one, but if Jinden wins this at least, we know for a fact that Cope is winning a set today.
I guess they won't have to cope for much longer if they end up winning. We're seeing the stun here. This is what I was talking about before, right? Like if they just get these stuns off, you get like this massive like combo attack. And while they might do a brutal skirmish or a troll chant, this is a lot of damage. We do see the brutal skirmish come in, but this is still 9.
It's a lot. That's for sure. And that's what the deck wants to do. It just wants to try and find that one turn where I get a good amount of stuns. And if you can't really do anything or utilize your freezes in an efficient way, this becomes very problematic for Ash. We don't even have like good outs for a freeze. We really want a Weapon Master to make this freeze better late game, but this is really scary. And are we just going to be furthering here?
Yeah, I think this fervor's pretty good. You're keeping the Annie alive, and Tibbers can be important sometimes, right? And you're only losing like a little bit of damage to do this while you're also controlling the board, you're killing a unit. I quite like this fervor. I think it's pretty heads up and allows you to apply a lot more pressure.
Right. So that deals 2 less, and the fervor wasn't going to face, but it allows you to give Tibbers. Yeah. I guess it gives... Okay, so it deals 1 more, 1 less, but you get Tibbers.
Think about Glaw's deck. While we can see the hand, Glaw's deck typically only has like 2 HP. Like I'm thinking like LeBlanc, I'm thinking like Ash. No, Ash has got... You don't have any other ways to buff Tibbers, I guess. You don't have like Flock or anything. Interesting. I do still like Tibbers. He's a big unit, and if we're thinking about like how Anijin plays, you really want this stun, right? Like the stun is almost more important than like the damage, right? If you put on something, you're able to like just get your wide attack through again a second time. I like it. It could be argued one way or the other, but I do like just having the Tibbers as a big unit to stun.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't know. Like I feel like maybe pushing a bit more damage is a consideration, but I like the idea of being cheeky with that.
The other thing to consider, just to make this argument a little bit better, your hand is like all units at the moment. I think you can go for another unit-based swing. I think if you want to go for another unit-based swing, you want to use Tibbers for that unit-based swing. But maybe that's just me.
I mean, like right now, how much damage are we doing? If we get Tibbers out, we stun 1 more unit. They only maybe have like 2 potential freezes here. We stop the 4/4. We stop the Tibbers. We can get in at least maybe 5 damage, 8 damage. We also push 1 here. This will be lethal if I haven't stuffed it up, but they don't get the Tibbers out.
Yeah, the Sunhawk changes everything, I think, because now you can play an extra unit. This is a lot of damage coming in from Jinden, and I think this should be lethal, right? We don't have access to the eye, but it should be.
I hope so. I did lethal for the Tibbers, and then Jinden says, "Hey, I'm not even going to play the Tibbers. I don't want you to do maps. I'm just going to cope and do this anyway. We can only get one block off here, and we don't have that freeze, so
It's a big
we
game.
block the Jinjin. Gore doesn't even want to do maps either. It calls it quits. That will be game for Jinden, and that means Copium card gamers are winning this, and this will mean they are taking the set for their team."
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see this. I was talking with Robo yesterday, and when the decks were released, he was really happy that they brought a double aggro lineup, right? Like Jinden was running aggro, and I'm pretty sure one of their other teammates was running aggro. And once they saw who they were going against, he was like really ecstatic. And we just see them being vindicated here, right? Like getting the win from Jinden, really like, it's just what they wanted to do, right? And they managed to do what they wanted to do really, really well.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. Very, very fast set. We know the results of one of them, and I'm wondering if we might see the last potential game, even though it doesn't matter, but it can also be very important for glory. Tiebreakers might be important as well. I know if I had some of the brethren go out in a sad fashion, I want to like grab the torch and make it, a spectacular fashion at least, and try and win one game and show that 3KG can compete with the big dogs. But not sure if that will be happening, but if it does, I'm happy to see an additional game.
Yeah, so for the... no. Okay, so the game is done at the moment. We're just waiting on the score, and then presumably we'll go to a break thereafter. And we're just in the waiting room. Do you have any thoughts on the last few games anymore in terms of like a more broad talk rather than just like the individual game-by-game analysis?
I mean, we're seeing like a lot of aggro. And I'm wondering about next week. Like, I'm trying to figure out, okay, if a lot of people are bringing aggro, what is gonna be the new flavor, right? Because we're also talking about the stuff moves in a wave, and if I'm on my surfboard, what is my next trip? And that's definitely what I'm thinking of. And I'm like, do I just go back to Israel Noxus? Probably not, because I think the flavor is still target Seraphine, because that's such a dominant thing. But it's definitely not going to be aggro. So I think maybe there might be more controlled builds. You might even have FTR. And when you have stuff like that, now you're targeting Seraphine, and now you're targeting the Seraphine counters. So I think that's probably going to be the most common thing.
Yeah, I think we have a rise of SI. That might be something that we see more. Like we saw in the first set, right? Like SI managed to beat aggro just because SI's got a bunch of healing options.
Right. And I did hear it, and I think I didn't actually hear it. Hirsch. Okay. Anarchy won as well, so that means Copium went.
No, Anarchy went 1-2 anymore.
Okay.
Not okay. Anarchy 1-2, Anarchy 1-2.
Production is going off right now, and I can't understand any words because I need to go back to school. But that's why we're pausing, because we're hearing from production, and Anarchy lost that one. So 3KG gets some glory, and I think with that, we're going to take a short break and get back to the third set, which will be the collab round, one of the most exciting things to watch. So stay tuned, and we will be coming right back. Well, welcome everybody to the last round of Aegis Esports for week 2. Today, for this third set, it will be the collab set, and we have Runeterran Pals versus 9 Lives. If you don't really know about the collab set, it's a very interesting dynamic for Aegis. Basically, what is the new what is the new format for this? Is you have one collab set, and it's basically a backseating backseating arrangement where you basically verse another lineup together and you try and win that way. So it's very interesting, and I'm pretty excited for these games. And Spids, are you pretty excited to watch these as well?
Yeah. When you watch these, there's a lot of like wait time, right? Because they always have to chat like amongst themselves. It's not just thinking in your head, maybe talking out loud. Now you're actually having to talk and go through every decision together. Often this means things can go to like time. And while I haven't seen many like time wins yet, it can be something to keep in mind. And the club set often shows like the best plays you can make in Runeterra, because you've got 3 of the greatest minds like making decisions, not just one, right? And if 2 minds are better than 1, then 3 is also going to be better than 1. So you always get like these really interesting, intricate play patterns that I think are really fun to watch and analyze.
Right, and I think that definitely changes the dynamic of teams, because you might have a certain set where you just want that one good player to be on it and give you that information. So even though if you might not have a star seller team of, the best that you could like have in it, you at least have like one good player that can definitely carry it. And I know Runeterra Pals, they have a lot of good players. Probably one really great player is Cosimo, but you have others like Camillari. And these people also not only have been really good, pals, they've been really good teammates for a long, long time. And I think synergy is very important. So you're probably not going to be worried about, are they going to be good in the backseating? Because they'll definitely communicate well.
Yeah, and like backseating skill, you've got to practice. You can't just like go into a backseat and just assume that you're going to do well, because you know how to play the game. You really need to like make sure that you've got roles assigned, who's going to keep track of the deck, the hand, who's going to be thinking about like the most like minor of plays that can make like a whole difference in terms of how the game works. There's just like so much to think about just in terms of like the structure that I think is really, really interesting.
And I think with that, we might actually get into the deck lists right now. See what they brought, and I think we'll be seeing Jack's Vayne. Spids, I know you're a fan of this. Do you want to kind of talk about this deck and what it does?
I'm a fan of this, although I've never played it. I just like whenever we have to practice against this in scrims, I'm always the one that you guys delegate to play it. But I really like this deck. I really like this form of like weapons-based Demacia with like a little bit of an aggro tinge, because it's kind of early game. You've also got the Harpy and the Vayne late game. And I've seen so many different builds of this. Some builds run like the board buff guy. I definitely remember his name. The wolf dog, some people run, some people don't. And also the spells are often a little bit weird. There's no sharp sight. Some lists don't even run catch. But I think catch and riposte are really good inclusions. I also like Demacia and Tellstones. I think Demacia and Tellstones could be a blowout in a lot of spots. What do you think about the list?
Yeah, so I think catch and riposte are like one of the most interesting things to run. A lot of them don't even run like, certain combat spells. So I think they have an understanding that, combat spells are very important. And if you're versing something like Seraphine, they are very, very much needed, because if you know that, this deck isn't running any combat tricks at all, Seraphine can kind of just run with it, right? Be not scared of anything. And I know Cosimo is a big fan of Demacia and try to popularize a lot of early lists of like maybe Demacia and refinement. So seeing something like this and thinking you're going to be on more combat spells is probably a smart idea of what Cosimo has tried to include, or maybe give the team some like certain perspective of like what we should be running, right? So I do really like this, and what else can we talk about? There's like some interesting inclusions, but you probably have more of an idea, Spitz.
Yeah, Parts Made Whole is another card that I see some people loving and some people not loving. The concept of refill in a Demacia deck is something that like hasn't seen much, right? Like we have Auction's Landmark in like Demacia in quotes, and sometimes we have Pale Cascade in Demacia, but now we've got Parts Made Whole in Demacia. I realize you can't see my air quotes. But nonetheless, I hope you can hear them. Pathmeat Hole is a really interesting choice, and we have like a lot of weapon generation, especially with Fire Aetherite, which is basically like 1 mana generate a weapon, do like a little minor attack. And I think this allows you to have like a lot more late game and a lot more play with the deck. I think a lot of people think this deck has a lot of like not that much play, right? Like besides like what you decide to Harpy, what you decide to Vayne, there doesn't appear to be much play. But I think Pathmeat Hole as well as Fishfight allow you to have a lot of interesting choices to make when you're planning out your turns 2, 3, 4 ahead.
Yeah, I think so. And don't worry about, people not seeing air quotes, because next time we'll just say it verbally so you all know when we're air quoting. And I think maybe we should get into the next deck list explanation mark. And here we go. We actually have Poppy Tarek, another, Demacian deck. And you're also actually running, a typical, standard of everything. You basically, what you're trying to do is like go Poppy with Tarek and 4 and then put pressure with your rallies. The rallies are really important because it either goes really well with your Tarek or it will level up your Poppy. You have some interesting inclusions here like the Sunburst, which is something a bit weird, not very common. I can see it being good against Bane. That's definitely why you're running it, because no combat threats can ever stop the Sunburst unless it has Spell Shield. And yeah, I really like this list. I think maybe triple Lodestone might be good, but you could be on 2 like they are. Very interesting inclusion, and I'm wondering what it's actually hitting for the matchups.
Yeah, I do like the Sunburst. Whenever you've wanted like big removal, you've always gone for Concerted Strike. But since Sunburst has been buffed, I really like Sunburst as an alternative line, especially against enemies that you think might have buff spells or might have ways to interact with what you might do when you play Concerted Strike. I also like Ibex. I think Ibex is a fun 1 mana card, but Ibex is a card that's sometimes seen play in this deck, sometimes not. And I think it has seen more and more play as time has gone on. And yeah, I just think this is a really interesting deck that can put a lot of pressure on in really interesting and unexpected spots, right? If you just have like 1 or 2 like rally synergizers, as well as maybe 1 like challenger, you end up having like these really powerful things that just blow you out of the water sort of unexpectedly. And you really have to like be proactive in dealing with this, like the Poppy, the Tarek, the Sojourners, before they can like put these rallies and threaten you. It's a really interesting deck to play against, and sometimes it feels like you either overrun it or it overruns you. But when you're at like the highest levels of play, I think it becomes a really intricate deck to play against and play as. I think it's a cool deck.
I also, it's a bit interesting being on free guarding 2 Pale. I would only think that kind of helps your Tarek turns on odds, because you play Tarek on 4 and then on odds you can just guiding straight away. So a bit weird. I do think Pale in general is a bit better, but I can definitely see why you're opting out for a free guiding touch. Also, it actually helps in the small pocket middle of aggro.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well, yeah. Like if we're expecting aggro, guiding touch. Why not?
Exactly. So yeah, guiding touch is a very nice free of actually, and I think you're going to definitely be good into aggro at least. And if you're not hitting these Seraphine lineups, if you're not hitting really these Vayne matchups, you're going to be hitting these aggro ones. And if that's going to be the case, then 9 lives must be happy.
Yeah. I don't know what else we can talk about with this deck. I do like the Lodestone as a weapon, and I think Haratsi gives you a lot of like a late game, right? In a deck that often struggles to have late game if you manage to like destroy their units, especially with Spell Shield. But yeah, I don't know what else we can say with this.
Right. And I think we might take it to a break for a bit. Not really sure how long, trying to set up these matches take a bit longer because you're trying to find who's the collaborator, who's the person actually backseating. So because of that, I think we'll take a slight few-minute break and we'll get back shortly. So stick around and we'll be back here soon. welcome everybody. We are back, and we're about to get into the matchup soon. If you don't know, we'll be versing. Well, not versing. We won't be versing, but we'll be watching what people will be playing, and that is actually Runeterra Pals versus Nine Lives. We went through 2 deck lists, but right now we'll actually get into the matchups and see who is versing who and what they will be.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'm just making sure I'm looking at this properly. So I presume Runeterra Powers is on anti-Demacia? I don't know if Jax Vayne is anti-Demacia. I'm trying to figure out, like, Varus Pantheon, I guess, is there because it's a good deck, but whenever I see it, I just assume it's there for anti-Demacia. And they do have 2 Demacia decks. What do you think about the decks, yeah?
I'm not sure. This is a bit of a weird one. Maybe they're trying to get better into Vayne, like you're saying. So, but you're running Israel Seraphine, and it's a bit iffy. Like, I like to think that Israel Seraphine can beat it, but there's some Demacia decks you can't. So, I don't actually know. This is looking very awkward for Runeterra Pals. I don't think I want to be up against any of these, really.
So I presume Nine Lives is anti-Seraphine, right? I'm going to check if they're on Stony in the MF list. But I presume they're, like, my understanding is that most people believe that SI Seraphine is bigger Seraphine. Because you also get to run Quietus, right? So you can kill their, like, champions, while you're also running the same stuff about Bar, with Victor being, like, another, you know, Ezreal-esque card that always gets value and tries to win the game. So I presume they're anti-Seraphine. And I think that means that Nine Lives will likely ban Varus Pantheon. What do you think, Anima?
I think so. I was also thinking, like, so it looks like it will be a bit of a tough time for Israel Seraphine. And we might need to keep up the Victor and this. I mean, like, okay. So the thing is, like, if we keep up the Victor for that, that means your Pantheon kind of loses good matchups, right? But if they ban your Pantheon, then you're actually happy with that, and you can kind of try and beat this Poppy Tarek, which loses a lot of, like, potential ways, which is very draw reliant to win. And then otherwise, besides that, you might just be able to mirror the Victor, because I think if you're a good player, you can beat that matchup a lot of the time.
Yeah, and on the side of Runeterra Powers, if we're saying that, because I can't see what the lineup is specifically targeting, it might just be saying these are, like, 3 of the best decks in the format, where some of the best players in the game. Let's just, like, outskill and attempt to, like, use our, because this is the collaborative set. Like, you've got 3 players who can play at once. Maybe you could just pilot Ezreal Seraphine to the best of your ability and beat any of its bad matchups, which is, like, that's part of what makes Aegis Seraphine so strong. Like, if it's the strongest deck in the format, it's because it can beat bad matchups, even if they're bad.
100%. And, like, even you can beat this MF Vayne. Like, MF Vayne is such a good, good bring against Israel Seraphine. But if you know how to play for it, you can actually kind of stabilize pretty well. Understand that if I deal with this MF or the Vayne early and maybe try and get, like, something, a Seraphine on the board with a weapon, it can kind of slow down the game. And you could even keep it up just for the Pantheon Varus to maybe sneak through a ban here. But otherwise, I don't mind just banning that, try and be good into the other ones. And yeah, I'm pretty interested to see what they will be banning.
Yeah, I brought MFA into last week's Aegis. My version ran Stony. This one doesn't. But I really want to point out MFA because it's a deck that I don't think many people have seen as much compared to other Vayne variants. One of the coolest cards in MS Vayne is the Darken Harpoon. The Darken Harpoon, again, as I mentioned in, like, the last set, allows you to add, like, draw to Demacia. You also run the Unending Wave, another draw card, and it just gives you, like, this really interesting method of refill that hasn't been seen in the Demacia deck, where you're using these fleeting cards to get refill. And so if MF Vayne doesn't get banned, I'd really like to see that deck, because I think it's a lot of fun to play and a lot of fun to see.
100%. It's probably, I don't know. I think it might be one of the more fun Demacia decks to watch. Like, it's very, very high paced, and like you were saying, those harpoons are actually very fun to actually see going off. And, like, there's a lot of synergy, and I think a lot of people miss. Oh, the ban on the Jack's Vayne, but like I was saying before, there's a lot of interesting synergy and kind of comes down to the multiple attacks and the Harpoon.
I think the Jack's Vayne ban makes sense because I see the ban on Seraphine Victor. You're going to be banning one of like the bigger Demacia decks, and I think as long as you're not banning the Israel Seraphine, I think they're both logical. But banning the Victor Seraphine, what do you think about this one, Enium?
I don't hate it. So I think Pantheon Varus probably struggles into that, and if they were scared of them not banning it, it makes a lot of sense. We're still kind of good into the mid range with this Panth available, but it really comes down to this Israel Seraphine sneaking a win. And I think there's ways you can, like, if you can kill the Vayne on free, you have a very high chance of just winning the game. And then with the, Poppy Turek, if you slow down one of their main threats as well, like a Poppy and their Turek, and they're not as explosive as the early game can be, there's definitely a high chance that, Israel can get a good win.
What I find interesting about both MF Vayne and Poppy Turek is that their champions cost the same amount of mana. This may just sound like a weird tidbit, but often like playing your champion on curve is like its biggest power spike. And having two cards competing for that role is interesting. Now, obviously, you can just play it the next turn if you've got both in hand. And especially for both of these decks, like that's a pretty common thing to do. I just think it's interesting that this is just like a weird tidbit that these decks seem to have both in common.
I agree. It's a bit of a tidbit, but one thing that kind of affects the game is, when your champions are 4 mana, because they're really competing for that slot. And Israel Seraphine doesn't really want power cards to happen a lot earlier. So this is why I think they might sneak out a win, because it gives you that one extra turn to kind of find leeway. And if they're kind of doubling down on those double champs on a turn, it has to be 4/5, right? So you have a lot more availability rather than this MF Vayne to potentially, disrupt any of the Israel like Seraphine's removal to try and kill.
What do you think about the Varus Pantheon deck? I know I've seen it quite a bit. I think some people have talked about it as like a hidden deck. I think it's rather well known. Varus Pantheon being like a really good anti-Demacia deck and another option for your Pantheon. What do you think about Varus Pantheon?
I think it's a good bring if you're trying to beat Demacia, but it loses a lot of footing against a lot of other stuff. I also don't think it's really good into anything if you want to see SI, because the main reason we saw this ban is because of Clytus, and if you lose the if you lose the weapon on Varus, you're just like losing the game. So I think that's why they banned it. And talking about that, we're in the game right now.
Yeah. Interesting draw from both sides. I don't know how to play Israel Seraphine. I've still not touched Seraphine yet. I'm still saved from all the Seraphine nonsense. Is this a good hand for Israel Seraphine? Without Flock, I'm a little bit concerned.
It's relatively good. We are talking about how 9 lives Poppy Turek is going to be a bit slower. So you kind of have the availability to pace it a bit more, and you just want to find Seraphine. The static is going to be good if they've had a bit of an awkward hand. You find them disintegrate later, but this top deck of the Hookmaster is very important just to slow down their turn 2 to freeze.
Yeah. You'll notice that the players are playing a little bit slower than you might expect. This is just because they want to talk with their teammates and figure out what the best play is every time. Which also gives us more time to talk about what the plays are. And fearsome is a really good keyword to get here.
I think fearsome is like the best thing you want to see as Israel Seraphine, like especially against Demacia, because they normally don't have stuff to kill it, right? So you can keep putting that on, and it allows you to get chip damage. One thing that's very underrated is chip damage in this deck, because like if you're put on the back foot, you can't really go for high-end Israel combos. The main reason for that is you lose a lot of like potential resources to kind of stabilize, right? So being able to put as much pressure as you can, especially with this fearsome unit, allows you to just make this Israel a cleaner win for victory.
Yeah. Guess what Seraphine got? Why did I say guess? You can see right in front of you. It's Absolver. Absolver is one of sort of like Seraphine has a few cards she's quite well known with. But Absolver is definitely one of them, right? Like being able to double the first half of Absolver to get 2 copies of the second half of Absolver adds like what, plus 10? It's quite good. And while it won't see play for a couple of turns, unless they use it as a combat trick, it'll be good later game.
It's really good, but one thing that's going to be even better for Ezreal Seraphine right now is seeing this 5-mana Sunburst where Taric can't be played. And, well, we've got another Seraphine, so this just slows down the game. You get a bit more value, and you can even put this weapon on and put even more pressure.
Yeah, that's a big mana commitment on turn 4. And for a deck that wants to play, like, 4 like power spike mana turns, this just puts you so far back. I'm not sure if that was the best line, but maybe, you know, like the rest of us, we all see Seraphine and just want her to be silenced and then destroyed by the power of the sun. So yeah, I don't hate the line, honestly, just from like an emotional perspective.
I don't hate it. Because like you're scared of, you know, disintegrate stuff, right? So I think it's important, and like you can never really bank on them having double champions, and like I that's especially what they are right now. They're sandbagging that Taric, and they just don't want to see any potential way for it to die.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at 9 Lives' hand, and while they do have the Haratsi, which is like an 8 mana card that can also be like an early card lodestone, with the double flock in Runeterra Pal's hand, like I think 9 Lives is going to have to really struggle keeping units around in order to attack. And Runeterra Pal's just got like a bunch of mana they can sit on, wait for 9 Lives to do stuff. Obviously, they're thinking about what to do now. I think this Blade's Edge is pretty good. Ooh, both at once.
Yeah, I really like this. You're not really getting, you know, you want to keep your Seraphine alive here. So we're taking this down. We know that they don't really run much combat tricks, and well, this back alley bar is also pretty important as a pickup.
Yeah, this bar will definitely, like, you know, as we all know, it lowers the cost of the stuff in your hand. It gives you a random card in hand. And because of that Sunburst earlier, like the fact that 9 Lives just isn't putting that much pressure on allows us to play this bar against the Demacia deck, which often, like, the joke about bar when like people were starting to do this, like Vayne versus bar, right? If they played bar, you can just win because you can rally or whatever. But because of the slower game state that we've been seeing, I think bar will just be able to be like a pretty decent play. It's going to be bigger than all the units on the field, the back alley barkeep. And I think this bar will be really, really good.
One thing I'm actually just so sad we didn't see was that weapon. Weapon means that like they can't really do this before either for that, you know, turn prior. I think we're also really happy with our mana, and we would have actually dealt 6 damage here. 3 damage the turn before, and another 3 with a potential 1 extra if Seraphine was slipped. So, you know, I think there's a lot of consideration. We could definitely say, hey, that weapon's important, but we also have to remember this backseating has so many complex lines that you might be thinking of, and you might just not even pick up stuff on stuff like that.
Yeah, the other thing they have to consider is that they've got 3 people watching. We've only got 2. So if anything, they should be thinking better than we're thinking. And I do think there are mana reasons why you can't play the Sandsworn Amulet from memory. Just in case they've got like the Poppy and the Taric and you want to keep up like flock lines. I think that's the main reason. And I don't think, since they sunbursted, I don't think the mana matters too much. You go there.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, because they sunbursted, I feel like you have a better range, and especially because you had a way to kind of deal with certain flocks and stuff. But
sure.
Talking about flocks, this Taric might be flocked because they can't really do much here. But we do also have a guiding, so 9 Lives playing as patient as possible is being pretty well because you have another guiding in hand. This allows you to play around flock range, and if they don't have anything else, which they do, it would be very good for them.
Just going to see the guiding here. One of the best things you can do with Taric is draw twice, because when he copies the spell onto the second unit, he'll play any draw-based self-targeting spell to a single target. That's what Taric does. And we're going to see just no units. And besides, obviously, the Dark and Lodestone in hand, no units feels a little bit sad on the side of 9 Lives, in my opinion, at least.
And I think Runeterra Pals can level up the Seraphine here. We have the Sun Fumes, which might need to be played anyway. So Seraphine actually being clutch here in the pool, it's allowing us to know if it's flipping or not on this, but it's not. Good thing, a mini type of production, I guess, but we have the Sun Fumes going to be enabled. This allows us to Freedom to kill this Tarek through another healing. I'm pretty sure, even with the tough. And if not, we have like Absolver lines that could even just try and kill it because it will be flipping.
Doesn't Tarek have 6 health with tough? Isn't 3+3 with tough not lethal? Are you thinking about flocking afterwards?
Flocking afterwards.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I do like the Absolver here a lot, right? Like, it's the same thing as it levels Seraphine, and it also does like a lot of damage. And because of how our hand looks, I don't think we need to use Absolver as like an aggressive line. I just really like using this Absolver here. Seraphine is kind of big.
Kind of big. Tarek, like, trying to be the macho man here, and it's just not going to happen. Tarek is just out of here. We do have the 5-cost spell, though, on the second Tarek, so there is some leeway.
Yeah, Blessing of Targon will keep Tarek alive, but not allow the kill to go through. And it also taps them out of, like, everything. And there's a decent chance that second Tarek might just end up being better.
I think it has to be if you just can't really, deal with that Seraphine. If Seraphine was dying, 100%, but sadly, because it's not, you just have to play for it. And yeah, there goes the Tarek.
And looking at this state, I think Rune Terrapals is like in such a commanding position here, right? Like, we've got a bunch of spells on the side of Rune Terrapals. We've got the Ezreal that'll probably come down relatively soon, depending on how many procs he has. We've got a bunch of ways to trigger things. Half of these cards I don't think have been played. Like, High Note hasn't been... Oh, you can see because of the bar, right? The High Note hasn't been played, something hasn't been played. We can even put, like, Fearsome on the Ezreal to let Ezreal strike through the Esmus. So I feel like as Rune Terrapals, you've got a lot of options for you.
Yeah, a lot of options is something. One thing I know as well is a 2-mana Fumes means that it will be dying here. So sandbagging those Tareks didn't really do much. We just lost both of them. Our Rally is now not doing anything at all, and it allows us to flip our Israel. Gonna probably equip the Sandstone Amulet, like you were saying, and that's going to be 4 to face. We also probably going to deal maybe 2 as well, and then Biggles Dust is also another amount of damage here.
Yeah, I know I've mentioned this a few times. I think if the Sunburst, I don't think was forced, and I think it just put you so far behind, and I think that's the main takeaway from this match. But on the side of Nine Lives, like, I don't think the draw was that amazing. Right? We didn't see Poppy, we didn't see Sojourners, we didn't see a lot of early game. We saw a bit, but not a lot. And we didn't see enough ways to sort of be a pressure deck. And I think we're seeing here like a very lethal Nexus.
I think it is a very lethal amount of Nexus. If we double spell up here, at least we would be dealing 6. We waited out. Not a horrible thing as well. Like, we could just kill them off the bat, but they have to play units here, and Nine Lives plays the Haratsi, and that will be game. Mystic hasn't even been played, and these other High Notes will just say, hey, it's done. I don't know why you're targeting your own unit. You can press the done button. You don't need to target your own unit. Okay, please stop doing this. But that is the win. Well played, and please stop targeting your own unit. Okay, it's not needed. Just hit the done button. High Note.
Yeah, for context here, if you don't know, this happened in yesterday's matches when EMEA fought someone, and for some reason they just targeted their own unit.
Some reason, like, I know we have 3 great players, but done buttons are done. You can hit them.
I mean, here EMEA doesn't really matter, like, at all, but may as well mention it.
Yeah, maybe might have been BM, who knows? But we'll be getting into the other match, and that one was a pretty quick one. I think Rune Terrapals are happy to get maybe a bad matchup out of the way, and talking about something that is bad, not their hand at least, and that's the double saga.
Their hand is definitely not bad, with that amazing segue that Annie just said. Double Saga Seeker, or even just one Saga Seeker, is like sort of the thing that you want to see in modern Pantheon decks. They're not on Wounded White Flame anymore, and I think Wounded White Flame is like probably a bit too slow for how Pantheon is built nowadays. So, like, being able to get the Saga Seeker, which is like the most important thing you can do in a Pantheon deck, is pretty strong. Now, 2 of them, depending on how your draw happens, can feel a little awkward. Sometimes you do want other cards, especially like your 3-mana units. But being able to have a weapon and a Saga Seeker, like this is like the dream come true.
I think like the main reason or the main way to kind of shut down other Demacia decks is just literally this Saga Seeker into a Lodestone. Makes very anything awkward here. And talking about another thing awkward is when you can get two of those, and double Saga Seeker allows that being buffed up as well. And this Pale just putting pressure on right off the Gecko, and 9 lives.
You say right off the Gecko instead of get-go?
Yes, I did, because geckos are cool.
The geckos are indeed cool. I don't know. I think cats might be cool, and 9 lives is about cat. Nonetheless, we do have a wide board here from 9 lives, and if they want to get a win here, I do think going wide with Poppy and with Taric is definitely the way to go. So while Runeterra Powell's definitely got like a really good opener, I think 9 lives also got a pretty good opener as well.
Yeah, they definitely do. You can kind of combat against this Poppy though, so it makes a lot of things awkward. This barrier is very important. So the two challenger units were really important here because you could have kind of tried to get back into this game, especially with the Poppy and especially with the support cards that you have. But getting the Pantheon down, not only does it just mitigate a lot of potential damage here, make stuff awkward, but it also means that these grapple units aren't as favorable as you want them to be because you can get the value out to try and stop this Poppy.
Yeah, just to translate any speak, grapple means challenger. It's pretty obvious to get, but just in case you weren't aware with how any uses words. Nonetheless, we've got a pretty good attack here, and I think 9 lives is just trying to make sure that Poppy doesn't have to needlessly die through a Pale Cascade. And there are definitely options with Tiari, where you can buff the broad wing that has the challenger keyword. Was that time?
Might be. Grappling stuff is hard, and it can definitely happen.
This is not a flashback to our collab set. Definitely not.
But that's what happens with time. Like, you're trying to basically set up a lot of things, and then challenging stuff actually takes a bit of time, and it can be somewhat not a good thing. But we get a trade out, which maybe they wanted to do anyway. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do like not attacking with everything. I feel like sometimes Poppy gets a lot more powerful if you just remember that you don't need to attack with everything. You just need to attack with one thing to get the level up condition. And from memory, you don't need to attack with anything to buff things up. Besides the Poppy, of course. But we're going to see the Wandering Shepherd targeting the Pantheon, making a big old Pantheon. Probably taking... actually, both of these are pretty decent. What do you think you take in Nemo?
I really like Quick Attack and Demacian Mirrors. I think Quick Attack kind of just makes life so much easier. But saying that, Pain is very good as well. The main reason is because it makes Poppy attacks awkward, and it really means you have to, really care about these challenging units. So it could be, anything really. But yeah, I do like the health there. Could be the Quick Attack. But even one is a very great choice.
I will say, I think those two are the best weapons they could have seen. Like, everyone thinks about Scout as the best weapon. I don't think you need Scout at the moment. And while it's got a commanding position, you could make it more commanding by taking Scout. I do think you can be also just in the same commanding position just by taking like the more basic option, which is the impact, but the HP is really, really nice. And I think we're going to see a Taric from 9 lives and try and like threaten a lot. You can definitely do the Protege and like pull a lot of things. But it's actually both are fine. But this is also going to be a lot of damage from the side of Runeterra Pals, like a fair bit. And we might be putting 9 lives on a 210 clock.
Right, we can't really block anything here. We can try and trade down this the Saga Seeker, and we know we can with the challenge with the 3-2 at least. So there's some merit there, but I think you're just trying to get the Pantheon as big as possible. And we know if we can get one challenger out of the way, that is also good. Because we were saying before, they really, really need to care about these units to kind of get around the Pantheon, especially with potential multiple attacks.
Yeah. When it comes to, I'm going to call the Pantheon deck a Demacia deck. if we pretend it's a Demacia deck, the way you often beat Demacia mirrors is through like being a bigger version of Demacia. I think Pantheon sort of has a history of being the biggest Demacia, and I think we're definitely seeing that here, right? Like Pantheon is currently a 7/7, and you've got the chump blockers that you need for the other stuff. This is just like a really strong position for Runeterra Pals, just based on this general principle of being bigger Demacia.
Right, and talking about bigger Demacia, they're hovering on this load zone, maybe thinking about using it for potential turns later. But you're really just trying to make the Saga Seeker big again. Trade off the one that was damaged anyway. Make this other one a 4/5, and it gets stuff a lot more awkward because the challenge is going to come out again. It's going to pull that 7/7. And if you can try and get a way to maybe block into the Taric, maybe block into the Poppy, it gets very awkward for that player.
The alternative line here is to not play the Lodestone because you can actually hold up Unforgiving Cold as well as Furious Wielder next turn because you've got exactly 8 mana. And I think seeing that they don't have a Concerted Strike in their deck, as we mentioned ages and ages ago, I think really allows you to be more aggressive with your Unforgiving Colds and your Furious Wielders. Like, they can't kill Pantheon in combat. They just can't. And so if you use Furious Wielder, you can definitely guarantee a kill on the Poppy or the Taric. So I do like not playing the Lodestone here.
Right. And Verdict doesn't even do it either because slow mana is a thing. So if you wanted to try and Verdict here, you can't have that availability, and no interaction is anything, but they're going to do it anyway. They play it now, maybe not considering that this will come back onto the field next turn and maybe get a challenger here, but this grapple unit is not grapple unit. This Pantheon is scary as possible, and Nine Lives wants to, say, hey, I can't do anything. I need this thing to go away for at least a turn.
I do think the play is sort of forced into your hand. If they don't have a strike spell, this is one of your few ways to have like a decently strong hand, right? Like allow the Puppy to live. You might be trying to find Pale Cascade on like your next turn to do like a rally, try and find it in your deck. I don't mind the play. I think it's quite forced, but unfortunately we can see that the hand is a Furious Wielder, and it just sort of puts a damper on the situation. Yeah. We're going to see here 2 Unforgiving Colds, which is like another way to beat Demacia. Like, you can just freeze them to death, or otherwise obviously Barrier and all this nonsense. But Unforgiving Cold is going to be really powerful over the next 2 turns in just like having like a big Pantheon at that point, having a big Varus at that point, and just freezing their Taric.
Yeah, freezing them to death is definitely a way. Just chuck them in the fridge, let them cool there for a while, and they'll never get out.
Do they have fridges in Runeterra?
Yeah,
maybe in like PNC, but not in Freljord.
No, I think so. Like maybe like even though it's a Freljord unit, and maybe if you're trying to keep it cold on the ice, you just like chuck it in the snowy mountains. But like maybe they're a bit like high end on the technology, and they've got a bit of power. Who knows?
Who knows? I'm certainly not a lore expert, but I'm pretty sure they don't have fridges in the Freljord. Nonetheless, here we've got the Pantheon. The double arrow, I think, means he'll flip if we target him. But this rally, which is exactly what like they wanted, right? Like this deck is built around like rally synergy, not intrinsic rally synergy. It doesn't say when you rally do this, but what it does say is when you attack do this, as well as the Taric rally synergy, which we're all very intimately familiar with, where if he attacks, he'll copy the rally and you get to rally a second time. Just going to see what happens here with these double barriers, double rallies, well, double attack tokens rather.
Right, and I guess that Verdict was literally what they needed. They really needed that chance just for a window of opportunity. Getting this rally puts, maybe gets you here, get you back into the game. Allows the Pantheon to shrink back to normal size. Can't really macho it out anymore. But I think Runeterra Pals understands that, and if that's the case, they're just going to keep up this freeze.
Yeah, I think that pass is interesting because I think you're just like, if they don't attack here, you're feeling pretty comfortable. If they attack here, you're also feeling pretty comfortable, whether you use Unforgiving Cold, whether you're just trading positively into blocking the barrier units but not losing your own units and then killing the units the next strike or whatever. I really like this pass here. I think if Taric attacks, my memory is that you can play Pale Cascade on him again anyway, on his second attack, so they will be able to draw 2 here depending on... Yeah, they will just be able to draw 2 here. if they attack a second time, which is good for them, but won't accomplish. It may not just accomplish enough, right? Like it may just be too little too late to be drawing to.
Right.
Although Pantheon might, not Pantheon, Tarek might level.
If Tarek levels, this gives you some availability to kill off something here, but it might do, right?
No. Because of Frostbite. I completely forgot the Frostbite was there. I do apologize.
Right. And now we're just trying to get this attack out. Due to the Frostbite Challenger, it won't get supported. I don't think there's any way you can kill the Pantheon here. The Ibex, does it support something else? It doesn't, right? And if it does, it's still only one attack.
If it gets supported, it gives the thing that it gives it like +1/+1. And you can give +1/+1 to the bird, but that's not enough to kill Pantheon. I completely forgot that it got frostbitten. Too many effects on the screen. I am too old for this.
But like, okay, this is really awkward. I'm trying to think what you're trying to do on the Tarek side, right? Like now you have to trade down. These trades are weird. I'll be honest. These trades are real. Why are we attacking here as Runeterra Powers? Is there a reason? Are we just doing damage here?
I think it's fine, and I'm trying to remember why I thought that. We do have to remember that Tarek will add a new card. So if they block with everything, Tarek can't Pale Cascade on anything, right? Because when he attacks again, he will Pale Cascade on something else to get an extra draw, and that might just be what you're thinking about. And so forcing them to block down means that their attack is like a little bit more awkward, depending on what they sort of like buff up and change around. But the thing is like, from Nine Lives' perspective, you can just buff up the Fleet Feather and then kill the 2/2 for free. So I'm not entirely sure. But you know, they've got 3 mines, we've only got 2. I'm sure they're thinking of something great.
I'm a bit confused here. I mean, like, we have Conan the Cold, so, like, if we have a decent Demacian board, we're kind of fine, right? We're going to be forcing ways to kind of trade down. Even though Tarek is leveling, I feel like it was kind of unnecessary. It allows, like, Pantheon now to be a bit small. We're going to get this back up, and if we had maybe another rally hand, even though Conan Cold's like a thing, it could have been troublesome.
There were so many rallies. I forgot it's 9 Lives turn this turn. I completely just forgot that so much. So we've got a really interesting hand. This Caught in the Cold. Why did you? Harsh Winds. The something or other. The 4-mana card. That Frostbites. That's Harsh Winds, but not really. Will be like pretty powerful on the side of Runeterra Palace here. We're going to see what the lottery rolls. I would pretend to make a slot machine noise, but I don't know how to do that.
Like,
thank you, Annie.
And we steal lottery, and live steal is probably the jackpot, the Powerball that you wanted here. Elusive is another one. We don't even care about the units anymore. They're healing us up. What do we really care? We can get the Cone of Cold. They don't heal us up.
These are the 5 best keywords, right? Like Quick Attack Challenger is like the best trading keyword. Elusive is the best, like, you know, going under key. Well, there we go. I think we sort of expected that. I don't think there's a single card in their deck that allows you to beat Pantheon in that position if you don't get the Sunburst. And yeah, quick into that set.
That was it. 9 lives here. Sadly, not having 9 lives, only 2 lives. Can't really be gracious and be cat-like. But that was it. Runeterra Powers showing who's the boss, and yeah, what a great game. I think like the Israel Sarah matchup was really interesting. They took advantage of like basically just disintegrating that Tarek, not disintegrating Tarek, but having the potential out to, right? So it made them kind of like 9 lives play around that, slow down the game, and then they just made an explosive turn. So I really did like that. And yeah, any final thoughts for those set spins until we head off?
It was interesting to think that we're going into an anti-Ezreal Seraphine lineup, and Ezreal Seraphine just like clutches the win. It really goes to show like the power of that deck, even despite like Demacia being in theory a bad matchup, especially like rally-based Demacia. Ezreal Seraphine just able to pull out the win anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think that might be it. I had a great time casting with you, Spid, today, especially on your first cast for Aegis. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. We'll be here next week. Stay around for, next week. Well, be ready. And yeah, we'll see you then. So catch you guys later.